I'd like to call this meeting to order and welcome everyone to the May 13th, 2024 Auburn City Council meeting. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Present.
Amara.
Present.
Holmes.
Here.
Sierra Sammons.
Present.
And Mayor Riddell Harris.
Here. Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure, please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to Mayor's commendations, proclamations, acknowledgements. Before we get to that, I just wanted to let everyone or remind everyone that our next meeting is not the fourth Monday of the month for this month, because that's Memorial Day. So everyone should enjoy their Memorial Day. Instead, we'll be having a session on 6/3. We shifted that to June 3rd. So we'll have June 3rd, June 10th, and June 24th for next month. So I just wanted to make sure everyone remembered that. And then we're going to be doing our proclamation. So our first one is for Lyme Disease Awareness Month. So is Melissa, there you go. Okay, come on up. Can you hear me in this? Okay, great. I'm going to be doing my part from here. So everyone has their parts of the proclamation.
Yes. Would you like me to begin, Madam Mayor?
Yes, please.
For Lyme Disease Awareness Month, May 2024. Whereas Lyme disease is often a misunderstood illness that can cause serious health problems if not caught early and properly treated. And
Whereas patients with Lyme disease are frequently misdiagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, and various psychiatric illnesses, including depression. Misdiagnosis of these other diseases often delays the correct diagnosis and treatment, while the underlying infection progresses. And
microphone on.
Children and older adults.
This mic's
And
not on.
people who spend time outdoors in wooded, grassy areas, including park rangers and firefighters. And
Whereas in some areas of California, Lyme disease infection rates of nymphal ticks have been found to be as high as 42%. Thus, the infection rate in certain regions of California is among the highest in the entire United States. However, since some areas of the state have not been tested for tick infection, the true scope of the problem is not known. And
Now, therefore, I, Rachel Riddell Harris, Mayor of Auburn, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim May 2024 as Lyme Disease Awareness Month, issued today on the 13th of May, 2024. Thank you so much. Would you like to say a few words?
Hi, I'm Melissa Moya from the Lyme Fight Foundation in the Sacramento County area. I really appreciate your guys' support again this year. It's really important for us to spread the awareness and keep our community safe. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Small Business Month. Jackie Weston, would you like to join me?
Hold on.
I apologize. I was out last city council meeting because I had a little cold and I'm still recovering a little bit. No, sorry, I'm not contagious anymore. You're out of luck. Okay, would you like to begin?
Yes, I will begin. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Small Business Month, May 2024. Whereas Auburn's progress has been driven by pioneers who take risks and work hard. And
whereas the city of Auburn has designated the month of May Small Business Month.
And whereas nationally, more than half of Americans either own or work for a small business, creating 2 out of every 3 new jobs in the U.S. Each year, small businesses have energy and passion for what they do. And when we support small business, jobs are created and more, and our local community preserves its unique culture. And
Whereas the city of Auburn takes this opportunity to highlight the impact of outstanding entrepreneurs and small business owners and recognizes that Small Business Month is a time for us to celebrate the successes of small business and to thank our small business owners and employees for their contributions to our city, our economy, and our nation.
Now therefore, I, Rachel Del Harris, Mayor of Auburn, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim May 2024 as Small Business Month issued today, 13th of May, 2024. And I just would like to say before Jackie says a few things is I'd like to encourage everyone to go out and visit our small businesses. Last Friday, I got to go and see the Bee Gal and get some of that really good honey, and also went to Yeti and got some ice cream with the kids. So make sure you go out and visit our small businesses and support our local entrepreneurs. Jackie, would you like to say anything?
Jackie Weston, CEO of your Auburn Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank you guys for spotlighting small business, because without small business, our town wouldn't be as amazingly fun as it is. I think that the small business that's in Auburn is just phenomenal, and we're lucky to have a lot of these business owners here, and we need to celebrate them. So thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, Addison, would you like to come up? So I had the opportunity to judge the speech contest for the American Association of University Women here in Auburn just a little while ago. And they have a speech contest, and the winner was Addison. And then on top of that, then those videos of those speeches are then submitted to the statewide competition. And Addison actually won the statewide competition for her speech. So we're doing a proclamation specially for Addison tonight, or a commendation. All right, you guys ready to? Okay, please go ahead.
All right, Placer High School student wins first place in a state speech contest. Whereas Placer High School student Addison Horn, a senior, won first place and $1,500 in a statewide speech contest on April 27th, 2024. And
Whereas every year, the American Association of University Women invite all high school students to practice public speaking in contests held by local AAUW branches. The first place winner of each branch goes on to compete into the statewide contest. And
whereas the topic of this year's competition was, how can we ensure a robust public school curriculum that is accessible to all and teaches historically accurate information? And
Whereas Addison Horn, who will graduate from Placer High School on June 1st, is headed to Sierra College in the fall, and later she plans to transfer to a four-year school.
Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Rachel Del Harris, Mayor of the City of Auburn, on behalf of the City Council, commend and congratulate Placer High School student Addison Horn for winning first place in the state speech contest, issued today, the 13th of May, 2024.
is there anywhere we can get your speech? Okay. Oh, okay, thank you.
yeah, yeah, I'd like to hear it too. Great.
And then we actually have one more late ad that we wanted to add to the agenda, and it is for National Police Week. So, Chief? And anyone else who wants to come is welcome to come up here too. Okay. Good to see you. Glad that you get to stand up in front of everybody. All right, are we ready to go?
Yes, Madam Mayor. National Police Week, May 12th through the 18th, 2024. Whereas National Police Week pays special attention to those law enforcement officers who have lost lives in the line of their duty. And
Whereas law enforcement officers play an important role in safeguarding the rights and freedom which we are guaranteed by our Constitution and in protecting the lives and property of all our citizens. And
Whereas it is important that all citizens understand the challenges, duties, and responsibilities of their police department and understand that these men and women recognize their duty to serve the people, and
Whereas law enforcement officers bravely and willingly risk their lives to protect the community from danger. And whereas law enforcement officers serve and protect with honor, courage, and strength. And
Whereas in 2023, law enforcement officers in the city of Auburn responded to over 21,000 calls for service, completed over 1,400 cases, and made over 660 arrests. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor Rachel Del Harris, on behalf of the city of Auburn, declare the week of May 12th through the 18th of 2024 to be National Police Week in the city of Auburn, in honor of the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep our city and citizens safe. Issued today, the 13th of May, 2024. Thank you so much for your service. Would you like to say anything?
Well, good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council members, Ryan Canan, the Chief of Police. And I just want to thank the City Council and obviously our leadership here in the city for the ongoing support for the men and women of the Auburn Police Department. Up here, I have our newest officer, Ashpreet Mathfalu, who has been with us several months now, and she's still in her field training, learning all the aspects of what we do on a day and night basis. So again, I appreciate that. Thank you for all the support. Thank you for recognizing this proclamation, the hard work that our men and women do. Thank you. Now, picture op. We get to the middle.
Yes. 500.
All right, let me take all my sticky notes real fast. Shoe fell off.
careful.
My shoe just slipped off while I was, oh man, that too. All right, it's a busy night. Okay. Moving on to the adoption of the agenda. This is the time set aside for the council members and or the public to ask for removal, postponement, or change the listed sequence of agenda items. The agenda will be approved by consensus of the council. Does the council have any items that they would like to move or change? Yes, Councilwoman Amar?
This is for the.
It's just the agenda
I'm sorry. no-
order.
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay, anything? Okay. Does the public have any items that they would like to change? Seeing none, unless I hear any objections, I will consider the agenda approved. Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine in nature and will be approved in one blanket motion with a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless persons request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for discussion and separate action. Any items removed will be considered after the motion to approve the consent calendar. Are there any requests from the council to remove items?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to remove items 6 and 8, please.
Okay. 6 and 8. Any other items?
Yeah, 6 and 7.
Okay. Okay, so we have 6, 7, and 8 so far. Anything else? Okay. Do any members of the public wish to remove any items from the consent calendar? Okay. Seeing none, is there any public comment on the consent calendar as it stands? Okay. Then I would like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar with removing items 6, 7, and 8.
Second,
Okay, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Sure, I'm going to note for the record that this includes item 2 being revised as provided on the dais and online.
Thank you.
And roll call is Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Holmes,
aye.
Sierra Sammons.
Aye.
And Mayor Riddell Harris.
Aye. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 6 from the consent calendar, the annual. What? Did I miss something?
Oh, no.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
The annual transportation fund claim for fiscal year 23-24.
Yes, thank
Would
you
like
very
to-
much,
okay.
Madam Mayor. I had asked that to be removed, and thank you very much, Menjel, I do sit on the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, but I just wanted to, because this discussion is so very appropriate as we get down further into the agenda about the budget, I just wanted you to maybe speak briefly about how these specific funds, once received, can be utilized. I know that the LTF, we have 634,000 plus some change for transit. There's 292 plus some change for street roads and improvements. STA has their specific allocations, and SGR also, specifically for transit and transit capital. But I wondered, is there any flexibility in exactly how these funds are spent within these areas? What I'm getting at is, what I'd like to be able to do is to reduce the use of general funds for anything and everything possible. And so is there a way to somehow utilize these funds to ensure that we're not relying on the general fund for these kinds of activities? Or is there not enough? So that's what I'm asking.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, Mandel Dean, Public Works Director. To answer your question, it's a simple yes or no, yes and no type of question. So the LTF funds consist of, I'm sorry, the TDA funds consist of LTF funds, STA funds, SGR funds. They're collected by a 0.5 cent sales tax through the region, and those funds are specific to the uses that you see before you today. So this year, the city received $927,364,000 in total TDA funds. Those funds are required to fund transit operations first. Once transit operations are fully funded, then those funds can be moved to streets and roads activities. And those are the only two official uses for those types of funds.
So then, and thank you very much. I know that they're restricted there. What I just want to make sure, though, is that do we have sufficient funding for transit that we won't require general fund using these funds? Because it looks like you are allocating almost 300,000 for streets and roads. So am I to believe then that we'll have sufficient funding for transit through these funds and not require general funds?
Yes, ma'am. So what happens is that once transit is funded by several different things. It's funded by what you see before here, the LTF, also funded by federal 5311 funds. And I believe the city received approximately about $100,000 this year for that. And then there's other funds like LC Top funds and things like that. So once all those funds combined totally fund transit, then we can move this. Now, keep in mind, what you see before you is a claim for the expenditures for last year. So once the TDA audit comes through and all checks and balances are met, they said, this is the amount that you need, that you're required to spend on transit. And then we take the remaining portion in this case, which is $292,000. And we could put that towards streets and roads. Now, streets and roads could mean a variety of different things. It means resurfacing. It could mean an overlay. It could mean sidewalks, bike ped, anything of that nature, anything that supports bicycle, passenger, or transportation related items.
So the other question that I have is really on whether or not these funds must be utilized in this fiscal year, or are we able to put them into account and save them for next fiscal year for those, like, not for transit? 'Cause, I mean, well, I guess for anything.
Right.
So, I mean, must they be spent by date certain?
So the way these funds work, these were the funds allocated to the 23-24 fiscal year. So once the TDA audit is complete so essentially these funds are paying for what we've already spent.
Okay.
That's the way this works.
So it's already, okay, all right. So we've already spent almost 300,000 on roads and streets that this will go for.
That's the one portion that allows some flexibility.
Okay.
If you haven't spent it on the streets and roads project yet, you can put it towards that. And in this case, I would say these funds have already been spent because of the larger streets and roads project that we put out.
So we've already spent that $300,000 approximately then. Okay. And then the last question, just to follow up then, is I just am wondering if are any general funds that are utilized for transit services, or are they all special funds like you've just discussed?
There's a
Federal and
small
state?
portion of the general funds that is utilized for transit services, and it's just a reimbursement for the mechanics time on transit. So part of the TDA process, the city's allowed to contribute general funds. The city historically has said the only thing that we want to contribute for general funds towards transit is the mechanics time. And so essentially it's an in-out. I can, maybe
My thought is on that, is that if we have funds and we have a little extra on the transit side
to put for roads, to alleviate any impact, we're scraping here. I would recommend that we use those monies for the mechanics time and not use the general fund monies, especially if we're looking at next year, if these are already spoken for this year. But that would just be an opportunity to save a little bit. I don't know what that equates to.
It's
but
about approximately $25,000.
That's $25,000 is $25,000. So that would just be my recommendation then going forward. If these have already been spoken for, if there's any funding in that, almost $300,000 that we haven't spent yet, it sounds like we already have.
Right.
Then let's spend it on the mechanic time, but it sounds like we spent that.
And
Thank you very
moving forward, we can certainly allocate the mechanics time on transit through these funds.
I just appreciate that while we maneuver our way through this fiscal issue. So thank you so much, Menjel. You answered my questions.
That was my, I have some questions. a
Sure.
couple. So yeah, on page 49, your line item says 18,000 is general fund contribution. Is that what you're referring to?
That's the mechanics time on transit for this fiscal
It
year.
says operating revenues.
Yes.
Okay. So, and then, I'm just curious of why, there's such an increase in expenses from one year to the next. Does it have anything to do with, us taking on the school, busing? Because there's quite an increase from,
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that happened over this, the period of time that this report covers. There was the first full official year of the on-demand transit. So there was some additional costs associated with getting software up and running, getting outfitting equipment and vehicles to meet the demands of the service.
okay.
So these are more or less can be thought of as one-time costs. We can expect that the overall transit operation budget should decrease, not significantly, because other things have increased in cost, but it should go down over the next few years.
Okay, and you have, well, operating wages and salaries were 160,000 for 23, 24 is the projection. So seems, as opposed to, well, actually it's blank, on the year before, 22, 23, other wages and salaries is 123.
So the other wages and salary are generally our part-time driver salaries, not our full-time employees.
Okay, yeah, it went up substantially then, from 123 to 160.
So with the addition of the on-demand transit program, we've had additional staff to meet that demand. We also, if you recall, we extended our hours. There was a portion of time during this fiscal year where we operated until 11 p.m. We've since drawn that back because we didn't realize.
Well, no, this is, okay, 23, 24 was less, and you're projecting more. You're
Which page?
projecting for 23, 24. I mean, excuse me, so, yeah, 23, 24, 22, 23 was less.
So yes, 22, 23 was less, 23, 24 was more because we had to use more part-time drivers.
Okay, and then you have another 60,000 for miscellaneous too.
What page
You
are
didn't
you?
have, that's
Page 50.
page 50. And you didn't have, well, actually, yes, you had miscellaneous the year before too, 64,000. I was just curious what miscellaneous is.
So miscellaneous items could fall on a variety of things, like there's various materials and equipment that don't fit into a standard so this form is a TDA standard form. They say these are these items that you can put against this line item. So miscellaneous are things we need for operations that sort of falls in there. I don't know exactly what that 64,000 is made of right now, but I can certainly
Okay, that's.
provide that if it's.
We can touch bases. And then, of course, the question I think I ask every year, there's a claim for strictly for bike and pedestrian, and you don't put in a claim for that. Is that correct?
Yes and no. So generally, we put in the claim once the pot has gotten big enough. Currently available to the city this year for bike ped monies are about $16,000. Now, while that may seem like a lot of money when you start to talk about putting out an actual bike ped project, that's very insignificant. So what we do is we bank the money with PCTPA, and we generally take it about every 4 to 5 years, where we're looking at about $70,000 to $100,000, and then we put it out for a larger pedestrian project. Generally, some years it's sidewalks. We can put it in for bike lanes and things of that nature.
Okay, and so it accumulates, it doesn't really go away, is what I hear you saying?
We lose no money by keeping it there. It's just better to keep it there and not claim it so it gets mixed up in other funds and we can use it specifically for a bike ped project.
Okay. And yeah, I was unaware. So you mentioned in your response to Councilwoman Dowden Cavillo that we can use some of the monies for bike and pedestrian, some of the road money, if we have some left over.
Absolutely. So bike ped things are considered transportation related projects. So the monies are available for that if that's the council's wish.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
But that would be competing with other road improvements. So pothole repair, overlays, things,
Storm drain.
ADA compliance and so forth. It would all be related.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Are there more questions?
Yes. It may be buried someplace in the report, but what is the ridership for our transit service?
The exact number for this year, I don't have with me. I wish I had. But I can say that the ridership has increased significantly since we've put the on-demand program. We've looked at it from a month to month and I'm not saying it's growing exponentially, but it's certainly growing linearly.
And that's because of on-demand?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And
So I'll say this, our primary ridership comes from our on-demand program. And in the months to come through the comprehensive operational analysis, you're going to see staff bring something to you where we're proposing to move all of Auburn Transit's transit service to on-demand because for all intents and purposes, the buses are just riding around empty. And we don't even utilize the buses for that anymore. We sort of use our on-demand to provide our fixed deviated service as it is. So there's no real reason to keep that service because it's not cost effective. And that's one of the things that we would like to implement to actually bring some of these costs you see before you down.
so has there been any thought to increasing the costs of on-demand?
Absolutely. So as you know, we're required to meet a fare box revenue ratio of about 10%. So for every dollar spent, we're required to make 10 cents back, which is a very low number. I'll say with the on-demand, we're hovering probably around the 20%, which is good. But overall, with the service requiring us to go a little further into the county than we would like to, because truth be told, Auburn residents sometimes have to go to a hospital and things like that where their own services are in the county. Part of the comprehensive operational analysis, we are going to most likely propose a fee increase. I don't know by how much. I don't know if it makes sense. We want to still be in line with Placer County and Roseville Transit.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Well, just,
yes.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm
No,
sorry.
that's okay.
Sorry, I didn't see them.
just along those lines, I mean, I utilize on-demand almost on a weekly basis. And I think I mentioned once when I first got onto council was like, this is so cheap, and so I think if we had to look at a fair increase, it would be fair increase would be fair, knowing how these people get around and the fact that, yeah, I mean, sometimes I do end up utilizing it to go to my work at the county offices off of Bell and Richardson. And the county transit just isn't suitable for that. The
Right.
timing is just not right for a lot of us folks that do utilize on demand to get to our work. So I do appreciate all the drivers. Gonna miss Rachel. But no, this was a good report. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the ridership stats if they can come in.
Absolutely. And just by way of background, the rates for the city was at 80 cents for a ride, which for general public for several years, we raised it to $1.50. And there was some hesitation about that from the general public. So when we initiated the on-demand, that was part of like the analysis that we did. And we thought 350 was a good number. Looking at it now, there probably needs to be an additional increase, but we kind of want to ensure that we're not pricing out the individuals who are currently using it. So that's part of that larger analysis that we're doing.
I had two quick questions. One is we talked before about having passes for seniors and students. I know that students would possibly use it more. And maybe if we had a semester pass or something like that, their parents could just buy it outright and then they wouldn't necessarily even use it. It might be there for emergencies. So have we looked into getting passes?
Oh yeah, we've implemented passes for the on-demand transit system.
Okay.
I forgot the savings on it, but it's a significant enough savings. In fact, the Placer Union School District has utilized that program quite a bit. We've sold a lot of passes to them
Okay.
that they're handing out to their students, and it's been working really well for us.
So are you selling to the school district or are you selling to the parents?
Both.
Okay.
Whoever wants it can get it. We do supply quite a bit to the school district. There's a lot of parents that come into the public service counter that pick those up as well there too. And there is a cost savings associated with buying it in that manner, and the passes never expire. So let's say if we've even raised the rates in a year from now, we'll still honor what's currently there. So if you buy as many as you want now, you'll have it for as long as you have it.
Okay, thanks for that reminder. Forgot that we got those up and going. The other question is when I went to the last 3x3 or a couple last 3x3s with the county, we had talked to them about the fact that we were serving outside of our city limits. And they had said that they were going to talk with you about either working together so that way there was some kind of compensation for that or something like that. Have you heard from them at all about that?
Yeah, so we have actually. So part of the comprehensive, I hate to keep repeating myself, but the part of the comprehensive operational analysis, we're looking at service areas. So we're going to identify exactly who's doing what. And if we need to modify, there's already an existing contract between the city of Auburn and Placer County for the commuter service where we pay them a certain amount for providing that for our residents. However, part of this analysis, we're going to look at that and see, do we need to reduce those costs since we're servicing some of their areas, or do we need to shrink our areas? It's being looked at as, I guess,
When we were talking about it, we were talking about partnership where because we're providing to North Auburn that we get subsidized for that in some way or compensated for that. So,
so that's part of the conversation, yes.
okay, great. Those were my two questions. Councilwoman Amara, did you?
Yeah, I just have a final note. And I brought this up before. I agree with you about on demand. It makes more sense than having regular scheduled, except for one area. I mean, I think we really do need to look at where the volume of people are. And on weekends, as I said before, they're down at the confluence. And if we had a shuttle that could run back and forth, try it for Saturday and Sunday, I think it would be very cost effective. I think you'd find, I'd at least like to see an analysis of some type, or at least a pilot program. And I know we did it before, but it was like I think twice a day or 3 times a day. You'd have to have one running because people, if we want them to park up in town, and frequent our businesses there, then they're going to go down and they want to be able to maybe stay 10 minutes, maybe take a hike and stay 3 hours. So having something that comes back and forth is a little more convenient for people. Otherwise, they'll just keep going down and the parking situation down there is horrendous. I think it's an opportunity. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I think it's a good thing to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. So just by way of background, when we originally ran the Confluent shuttle, we were running 5 trips per day, and it was between the hours of 11 and 5, and it sort of landed on being just about every hour. And we were really hopeful for some of the things that you were saying. We utilized that service for 2 years, and I have to be extremely honest here. In that 2 years, we probably had about a total of 7 passengers. So, and we pushed it. We advertised it through El Dorado County. We did it through different varying social media things, but it was just, I'm happy to bring it back. I would love, we're going to try things to bring it back in the future, but it simply wasn't cost effective. So we had to pull that service back.
I totally get it. And again, I'm not going to argue with you. I believe you. My thought is just if it's going back and forth all the time, when people go down, they know that someone's going to be down there in the next 15 minutes.
Right.
But an hour, anyway, and maybe things have changed too, because if you've been down there on the weekends.
Yeah, it's quite busy.
And they've also stopped some of the parking down there. They've limited parking. So that might be another change that will encourage people to park up here and take a shuttle down.
The biggest challenge I think we were facing with that operation is when we would get down to the confluence and to come back out through the Forest Hill side of things, the total round trip took about 45 minutes. So the reality was that doing it every hour was probably the best we can do. We could probably tighten it up a little bit, but we don't want to put our driver on just under additional constraints or,
the roundabout will help.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Are there any more questions?
I just want to say, I do appreciate Councilwoman Amara. And I remember when we did the inaugural shuttle ride, I went on it down for the confluence and we did the whole route and it did take almost an hour. It just took that long to go around. I just caution, given that it was not as successful as we had hoped. I just, right now with our finances the way they are, I just caution our movement into a program that unless we really have some kind of data that's going to tell us that something different, I just get concerned about additional dollars. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we implement any operational change, there's going to have to be a significant analysis to support actually doing it. And we would bring it before the county council, so you would be very aware of what was going on. So,
Thank you so much.
my pleasure.
Okay, is there any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none.
All right.
Is there a motion?
Yes. Madam Mayor, I move by resolution to authorize the Public Works Director to submit the 2023-2024 Transportation Development Act, LTF, STA, and SGR claims to Placer County Transportation Planning Agency for approval.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dowden Calvier, Amara,
Yes.
Holmes,
All right,
Sarah Sammons.
Aye.
Mayor Riddell Harris.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, moving on to item number 7, the Canyon Creek subdivision acceptance of public improvements. Who was that?
I did. I have a conflict. I don't know how you say it. I have a conflict. So I have to leave, I guess.
Yes. So I believe the conflict is because you own or have an interest in real property within 500 or 1,000 feet of the subdivision.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for letting us know.
I actually have just a comment to make on that. in a
Okay.
moment.
We'll wait till Sandy or Councilwoman Amara.
So, since this has been removed off the consent calendar, I know that, council members, that you probably received the same correspondence, that I did about a resident that resides on Riverview that had concerns about, the vehicles that are utilizing Riverview instead of going around Maidu. And so I just, know that the chief was looking into this, and I just want to let folks know that we are aware of this issue and that we're very much trying to rectify it. So since, like I said, it was pulled off consent, I thought it was a good opportunity to make that statement.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? Mr. City Manager, I just also wanted to, since this was pulled, we were looking at the revenue sources. I was looking at the revenue sources that come from this, and it's just tax revenue. And we were talking about development fees that normally would go with this kind of development. Are those currently in the works? So that way they're paying their fair share of the community services that would be accompanying that?
They are, we're in the process of updating those. I'm not sure whether or not this is a final map or vesting tentative map. So I don't know I think it's final map. So fees would already have been.
So it wouldn't be on this one, but in the future.
Future subdivisions will have, though, we're also going to start implementing subdivision agreements that will have sort of a CFD or some sort of a component to help pay for the ongoing maintenance of the streets in those subdivisions as well.
And we don't have those now, but most cities do have those in place.
Yeah, Loomis had like 25.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I just wanted to clarify that. All right, if there's no more comments, I'll be open for a motion.
Is there any public comment?
Oh,
Madam
sorry.
Mayor?
Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none?
Madam Mayor, I'll move by resolution to accept the public improvements associated with the Canyon Creek subdivision.
second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Sure. For the record, Councilmember Amara is absent for the vote because she recused. Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes,
Aye,
Sarah Sammons.
Aye.
And Mayor Riddell Harris.
Hi. Thank you very much. Somebody gonna grab Councilwoman Amara? Okay, moving on to item number 8.
Yes, and Madam Mayor, I took this item off the consent. I just had a couple quick questions on this. Hello, good evening. I won't
Good
say
evening.
morning, But good evening. I know that we received, the total grant was in the amount of 797,000 and some change for 4 years, which breaks down to about almost 200,000 per year. This is a proposal that would utilize about 84,000. Do we have plans for the rest of that allocation, or have we already spent that, or what have we spent to date? First of all, and what are we gonna, and how are we gonna spend the rest allocated for this year?
Yeah, good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council, Lindsay Davidson, Community Risk Reduction Manager for City of Auburn Fire Department. So in the first fiscal year of this, so throughout 2024, through about next July, we're expecting to spend the biggest chunk of the funds. So that'll probably total about $500,000 to $600,000 based on the bids we get back to do the actual work on the fuel break. So this first $84,700 will go towards just the CEQA and archaeological, as you see in the staff report. And then as soon as that's complete, we're going to go out to bid and hopefully before the end of the year, break ground on the fuel break.
But do we have to use, are we able to use it all the amount at one time, or do we have to just use year by year? That's what I thought we had it was over a 4-year period.
Yes. Yeah. So it's over a 4-year period, but the initial fuel break treatment is going to be the
And that
biggest
can be,
cost
it doesn't have to be
associated.
done every year. It can be over several years then.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So that 500,000 is gonna go towards the 120 acres, the biggest fuel treatments
Okay.
and weed spraying. And then after that, it's just gonna be maintenance in the following years. So that's gonna be significantly cheaper in cost.
Okay. And what have we spent so far?
This is gonna be
This
the
is
first,
one.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's all that I had.
Councilwoman Mar.
While we have it out here, so we're contracting with the highest bidder, and I read why.
Yeah.
Is it appropriate or does it, because of time, that we don't go out to rebid and let them rectify their?
Yeah, the time constraints on this are pretty tight right now. So initially, the city had a CEQA exemption that we thought would work for this project, but upon reevaluation with CAL FIRE, we needed to reallocate funds within the grant. So we already had to go to amendment with CAL FIRE. That came back. That took an extra month out of the time frame. And so now we're set back a little bit, especially with at the end of the year, we're waiting to actually get the grant approved and finalized, and that pushed like 3 or 4 months down the road. So we just really need to get moving forward on this.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions on this item? Okay, seeing none, is there any public comment on this item? Okay, then I'll bring it back for a motion.
I'll move by resolution that we authorize the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with Mason, Bruce, and Giard for the California Environmental Quality Act analysis and archaeological surveys required for the CEQA compliance of the Baltimore Ravine shaded fuel break in the amount not to exceed 84,000.
I'll second it.
Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Amara.
Yes.
Holmes.
Aye.
Sierra Salmon.
Aye.
Mayor Riddell Harris.
Aye. Okay, the motion passes. So moving on from the consent calendar over to public comment. And this time, this is a time provided so that the public may speak to the council on items that are not on the agenda. Please make sure your comments are brief as possible, not to exceed 3 minutes. The council cannot act on items that are not included in the agenda. Items may be referred to staff or placed on a future agenda. Is there any public comment for this meeting? Come on up.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Saul Brocker. Yeah, I just wanted to make a public comment. I don't know the details, but from what I've heard, Encore Music might be going out of business. I don't know if you knew that, but I just, yeah, thought you might want to know that if you didn't know. So.
Thank you for that. I heard that too. That's very sad.
But they took their signs down, so I don't know what's happening.
I heard they were moving. Because
I
my,
think
it
online,
was like a moving sale, but then it said going out of business, but then I saw the signs down. My husband and his bandmates have been,
online, the
I don't
owner put
know.
going out of business on Facebook, so I
well,
hope
then there you go.
he's moving, but
It's just a shame.
it's a
It
shame.
is.
We're having a lot of that going on lately. So is there any other public comment?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, Mr. Holmes? Councilman Holmes?
Yes. Well, at the recent Placer County and city officials meeting, there was a presentation about encouraging local organizations, districts, government organizations to be more outgoing and to recognize their contributions to the whole community and so forth. So I wanted to mention that one of the things that Auburn could possibly do is investigate becoming a cultural district, which Grass Valley and Nevada City have done to give us more things that when we're talking about Auburn, it's not just the, endurance capital of the world, but other things as well that we can point ourselves to have some unique aspects that we can promote. And also, I want to mention that about 10 years ago, the city did a survey of the community. And I'm just going through that now, but there were things about what people were most satisfied with, what they were less satisfied with, and so forth. So I'm gonna look at that, and maybe at our next meeting, I can make some comments about that.
Thank you. Yeah, I was also at that meeting, and it was some good information brought forward by Visit Placer about, I think a lot of it had to do with when you do get a claim for something, that you should post it on like a specific page. You were in there too, on the website. We don't really we tend to put it out on social media when we get, best small town for something, or best pizza place on Yelp or whatever it is. But we don't necessarily have a page, so maybe we can look into that. So, but I think a lot of this, we're getting a lot of good survey information from the general plan, and that's happening right now. So I think that'll be some good information back to us too. Is there any other public comment?
Just a quick one, Madam Mayor. Since the next time we'll be meeting, our Placer High graduates will have graduated. They're graduating the weekend before we meet again. So I just want to say congratulations to the class of 2024 and our other graduates here and there in our great city.
Congratulations to them, definitely. Anyone else? Okay, then we're gonna close public comment, and we're gonna open the public hearing. And the council, when considering the matter scheduled for hearing, will take the following actions. We're gonna open the public hearing to start, and then we're gonna have a presentation by staff. Do I need to hit the gavel or anything fun? Okay, we have a presentation on the public hearing to levy annual assessment fee for business improvement districts.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. The item before you tonight is to conduct a public hearing to hear comments from those affected by the assessment fees of either the Old Town or Downtown Business District. On April 22nd, the City Council heard a report from the Downtown Business District, and tonight you are scheduled to hear a report from the Old Town Business District. Also on April 22nd, Council adopted a resolution of intent to levy and collect annual assessment fees within both districts. As a reminder, the annual fees remain the same with no changes from prior year. However, the city's municipal code allowed for a late fee of 1.5% in these districts, in which the city will begin charging after July. A copy of the adopted resolution of intent was published in the Auburn Journal on April 27th to notify residents and business owners of this public hearing to be held tonight. That concludes my introduction of this item. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to the Old Town Business District for their annual report.
Are there any questions for staff? Okay, then moving on to the Old Town District.
Hey, hi, I'm Brad Baldwin, Council Mayor. I don't know if you've seen the report. I think we issued it last meeting, and it pretty much stated that we spent money on, or we earned money through the co-ops and then the Christmas events. And so we have a very large budget of roughly $1,000. We get 21,000 to 24,000 in BID funds. So those are coming up soon again. We're looking into lighting in the upper parking lot. We're just kind of brainstorming ideas. And then also for the streetscape project, with the limited budget, we're hoping to contribute to that as moving forward. So I'm trying to remember what we spent our money on. It was limited. I like to save when we can. Any questions?
Thank you for that. Are there any questions?
Yes.
Yes, Councilman Holmes.
Well, I'd like to know, because I noticed on your budget, you're budgeting for the post office in Old Town, which has been closed. And my question is whether the city has received any response from the Auburn postmaster regarding the explanation as to why that post office was not renewed, the contract was not renewed. Because that looks like it's a significant,
That was I think it was $7,000. That was like 3 years in rent. So we were paying rent for many years for the post office to be operating. And so now that it was last year's payment, we are now net savings that money. So we're not paying, I think it was roughly like $500 a month to keep the
Yeah.
post office running.
okay, all right.
So yeah, I do know that you're pretty much our last spearhead of keeping that post office going. So if you can do it, we're behind you.
Well, we're working with our blessed congressional representative to try to get that moving. So we'll see how that goes.
Are there any additional questions?
Still empty then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any additional questions?
No, just a reminder that of course, these are monies that you are assessing your businesses. These are not city funds. These are entirely funds that are coming from the businesses for the businesses. So thank you very much for your contributions to better Old Town.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay. Seeing none, city attorney, since there's I haven't done where there's multiple public hearings, do I open it for all of them or do I open it individually and close it individually?
You open them individually for each of the public hearings.
Okay,
Yep.
great, thank you. All right, so since there's no public comment, then we're gonna close the public hearing for the levy of the annual assessment fee for the business improvement districts. And then we have council comments and questions. Is there any? Okay, then on to council action.
Well, we have to,
Adopt a resolution.
yes, we have to adopt a resolution. So I'll make a motion that we adopt a resolution to approve the FY 24-25 levy of annual assessment fees for the Old Town Auburn Business and Improvement and Downtown Auburn Business Improvement Districts.
Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Amara.
Yes.
Holmes.
All right.
Sarah Sammons.
Aye.
Mayor Vidal Harris.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to the second public hearing. We're gonna open the public hearing for the introduction and first reading of the ordinance of 24 with X's, amending section 100.87 of the Auburn Municipal Code fuel modification standards.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Lindsay Davidson, Community Risk Reduction Manager for City of Auburn Fire Department. Before you, we have a brief presentation on the requirements of ordinance 100.87, fuel modification standards for new constructions within the City of Auburn. As we all are aware, persistent drought, increased temperatures, and more severe winds have increased the severity and frequency of wildfires within California. So we are taking the initiative to bring this ordinance forward and help our new constructions be wildfire resistant. So Chapter 7A of the Building Code are the minimum building standards for residential structures. In 2019, the City of Auburn designated all areas within the City of Auburn as a wildland urban interface. This means that we enforce the most strict building standards on these new constructions. And so with that being said, we are adding basically 100.87 to the construction code within the city in a way. So whenever we get a new construction in the city, we're going to utilize the 0 to 5 foot zone and require these constructions to be in compliance. So again, we're taking a similar approach as Chapter 7A is. And so the 0 to 5 foot zone, even though it's not currently a state law, we are going to implement it before state law takes effect on new constructions so that when it is implemented in the foreseen future, in the next couple of years, we see that happening. These constructions are already going to be up to code. And we just want to emphasize that this will not be enforced on existing structures. It is only going to be new constructions. So what is the ember resistant zone? So the ember resistant zone is a 0 to 5 foot horizontal distance from structures, any outbuildings and attached decks and stairs around structures. This zone also includes the area under attached decks, which I'll give an example of later, and stair landings. The ERZ Ember resistant zone reduces the likelihood of structure ignition by reducing the amount of combustible materials near these structures in some of that big paragraph. So what is required of the ember resistant zone? So this picture is a good example. There's no wood chips, bark, combustible mulch, or any synthetic lawns within 5 feet of the structure. All grass, plants, shrubs, trees, branches, leaves, weeds. So basically anything combustible is removed from the zone and placed outside of the 5-foot zone. And then combustible boards, timbers, planting pots, and containers shall not be placed within the zone. So that could be planters, that could be hanging pots off of the house. Basically anything, again, combustible must be outside of the 5-foot zone. So one of the most cost inhibiting things will be the fencing. So this is really the only additional cost that will come. So non-combustible fencing is going to be required for any fencing touching or that's perpendicular to the structure. So 0 to 5 foot perpendicular fencing touching structures is going to be required to be non-combustible. So that doesn't mean that a fence going down an entire house within 5 feet of the house is going to be required to be non-combustible. It's just whatever is touching the house. So storage outbuilding. So this will come. So how we're going to define this is anything that goes through the planning department and requires a permit to be built in the city is going to go through the process of implementing the 0 to 5 foot zone. So typically 120 square foot outbuilding, anything that's going to require Chapter 7A is going to require the 0 to 5 foot zone. And this is what I was talking about earlier. So if somebody's going to add a deck off the back of their house, for example, then that deck becomes the lining for that 0 to 5 foot zone. So you have to go 5 feet outside of the decking, and nothing combustible can be placed on or underneath the deck. Again, those were just the kind of overview of what's going to be required, and why it's important is because we have the 3 factors that cause ignition or structure ignition. We have the direct flame contact, embers, and radiant heat. And adding the 0 to 5 foot ember resistant zone is going, ember resistant zone is going to significantly reduce structure fires. The end of presentation. I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions?
I do have some questions, Madam Mayor. So thank you very much. You had talked about structure construction, and this would only relate to new construction or something that would require a permit. So what if you have an existing house with an ADU proposed? That ADU would then have to meet these requirements, is that correct?
Yes, the ADUs would have to meet the 0 to 5 foot non-combustible zone.
Okay, so an existing house and a new ADU would be subject to that.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see here. I think that was really the only question that I had. Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Marr? No. Okay. Councilman Holmes? No? There's none?
I guess I did have something else too. What about a remodel? If you have an existing home that has a remodel of the roof or siding or something to that extent, a permit's going to be required. But is that considered new construction?
So we are not going to consider that new construction. So we thought about doing some sort of, if it met a certain portion or percentage of the house that's getting remodeled, but we ultimately just went for completely new constructions.
Okay.
But if as I gave the example, if they're going to add a deck off the back, that then extends that zone. So they would have to provide that 0 to 5 off the back of the deck.
Okay. Okay. So if you're going to get a new roof or something else, then wouldn't be subject to that. And then is there any, clearly we'll be able to determine whether or not compliance has been met once the house is constructed, but we really won't be able to do too much once someone moves in and decides to do something.
Yeah. So the goal of it is to ultimately find a way to provide that education to the new homeowners and show them that in the coming years, it's whatever they do put in that zone is probably going to have to be ripped out anyways. So we're just hoping that people understand why we're doing it. But if they do plant something in that zone, we don't have an enforcement mechanism.
So we'll be able to provide some kind of education or what have you to new homeowners of the new construction, just saying, please note that it'd be great if we had some kind of little paper or flyer or a link to something electronic or something, just so that they could become more aware.
Yeah, and it is going to be a case by case basis. If a homeowner is building the house themselves and they already know they're going to be in that house, that's going to be significantly easier. But for those developers that are just building the house to build the house and then they're going to sell it, we're going to be able to give them the material, but whether or not they pass that on to the homeowners is a different story.
Yeah, maybe we can do some kind of education online or something, just to, you know, if you are a new homeowner and you bought a house and it has that ember-free zone, this is why it's important to maintain it. I just, you know, I support your proposal. I just want to make sure that there's that continued somehow education, even if it's just online, so that we're not having to spend extra dollars, but so that people keep it that way. Because
Yeah.
it's fine if it's constructed that way, but then if it gets changed right after someone moves in, it's defeated the purpose. So.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Okay. I have a couple quick questions. As far as outreach has gone, since we had some things that came up with the last time that we did something around home sales, have we reached out to the building industry, to BIA, made sure they're aware of this? Have we gotten their thoughts or concerns about this and gotten comments?
So ultimately, so we did reach out to PCAR and they had a couple of questions. We answered their questions, covered that. We've been working with the planning department and kind of asking what they see coming up with this. And there's really ultimately, so our planning department does the landscape reviews anyways. So throughout that landscape review, we didn't really see any issues with the construction companies running. We didn't see any issues that they would run into with this update. There's very minimal things they'd have to change. Like I mentioned, the real change would be the fencing, the 0 to 5 foot fencing. That's just a plan review comment that is pretty easy to pass on to the companies.
So what estimate do we have on the increased cost that it would take to achieve this versus traditional homes that are done right now?
So I'm not sure the cost of the 5 foot of fence, but aside from that, it would just be replacing the mulch around the house.
Okay.
Those are really the only two costs that would come with this.
The metal fence there doesn't provide much privacy. Are there non-combustible options that are not looking like that?
Correct. Yeah. So they're coming out with just like decks, how there's the non-combustible decking material now. They're doing that with fencing. You can also do, I mean, the chain link with the different materials in it. That's not very pretty, but they're doing the non-combustible decking material as fences now.
Okay. Because even the I can't remember what the type of decking is called.
Trex
The
deck.
Trex deck is
Yeah.
still combustible, right?
Yeah.
It's plastic. It still
Yeah.
burns. It's just not wood. Is
Correct.
that considered non-combustible even though
That's
it does
considered
burn?
non-combustible.
Okay. Are we going to have a suggested layout for them or materials that they can use? Because you keep saying non-combustible, but there's, I mean, other than rock and concrete, pretty much everything is combustible. So are we going to have a list of what's considered non-combustible for them to be able to know?
Yeah, so mostly the ordinance lays out what is combustible. And because there are so many different options out there, I'm more than happy to develop a list of things that we recommend. But
Okay.
at the same time, what's not allowed is sometimes easier to say than what is allowed.
Okay, I mean, people have said Trex is combustible. You don't want to use that in a fire zone and things like that. So and you would say that it's not combustible. So I just want to make sure that people, if they're trying to comply with this, know what they should and shouldn't use.
Yeah, we
And-
can put together like an educational list for all that stuff.
That would be great. I think that was most of it. Oh, the other thing too is is there going to be any, if somebody complies with this, is there going to be any way that they can show this to fire insurance? Because we're all having such a hard time getting fire insurance anyway. So is there going to be any benefit to the homeowner get certified or anything like that that could help them with their insurance? Or is it just going to be something that we do that kind of helps with our community and it's, you know, it helps them, but there's not anything that they can really do with their insurance?
So what we've been coming across is that insurance companies are going after that 0 to 5 foot zone the most for these existing homes. And so people that don't want to rip out all those shrubs that they have initially or planted 10 years ago or were planted when they bought the house, they're having to rip those out or change insurance companies or get dropped. So we're seeing that the insurance companies are taking a very, very hard look at the 0 to 5 foot zone, more so than the state, more so than we are. They're the ones enforcing that zone right now. So I think it will have a huge impact on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I had. Is there any public comment on this item? No?
Actually, I do have one more question.
sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Chief, did you want to say something too?
Yeah, I was going to give some public comment.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay.
It was just one clarifying
Yeah.
question. Because we mentioned that if it was an existing structure, it wouldn't be under the rules, but an ADU would be. What about if you're adding additional living space to an existing structure like an additional bedroom? Does that create that kind of buffer like you were saying with the deck?
So if you're adding on to the existing structure, and you're having to move that landscaping anyways, and that's going through our landscaping kind of review process, then yeah, that would be enforced with that.
Okay, okay. That's it. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Really, the footprint, extending the footprint of the home would be subject to. If you're not making changes to the footprint, then you're not subject to it. I think, is that fair? Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. John Rogers, your fire chief. And I just wanted to take a minute to recognize Lindsay for the presentation she provided you this evening and recognize the work and efforts that she's put into updating 100.87 and improving the fire safety in our community.
Thank you.
Hi, Glenn Kramer, El Oro Drive. So I'm just kind of curious because in 2011, I built my house to wildland fires standards. And I have a deck and it's supposedly non-combustible. So does that 5 foot still apply then to the standards?
It's existing.
I think, well,
If it's an existing home, then you're not subject to the requirements of the proposed ordinance. It would just be for new construction. So if your deck is existing, you're not making any changes to it, then this ordinance wouldn't be.
I'm just trying to nail down how they define non-combustible, because if you comply with wildland fire standards, I don't really see how that enters into it other than, it's certainly good to keep it 5 foot away, but if you build something new and it's to wildland fire, should it still be required? That's my question.
So with chapter 7A, in theory, the houses that are being built are also non-combustible, but the 0 to 5 foot zone still applies. So with decks, a lot of these non-combustible decks still have that wooding underneath, which is where the 0 to 5 comes into effect and will be extremely important with that. So yes, if you were to build a new deck, even if it's non-combustible, that 0 to 5 foot zone will still apply.
because the bracing underneath is still wood, even
Yes.
though the top part of the Trex is, yeah, the footings and those kinds of parts. Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, we're gonna close public comment. And then we are gonna close the public hearing on this one. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, introduce the first reading of an ordinance by the title only, amending section 100.87 of chapter 100 of title 9 of the Auburn Municipal Code, adding an ember resistant zone requirement to new constructions within the city of Auburn.
Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Amara.
Yes.
Holmes.
Aye.
Sarah Sammons.
Aye.
Mayor Adele Harris.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, we have one more public hearing, and that is on the adoption of the updated fee schedule for building and planning. So we're gonna open the public comment on, or open the public hearing on that and get a presentation. Thank you. From
Good
staff.
evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. Jonathan Wright, Community and Economic Development Director. So when I started working for the Community and Economic Development Department around 2 years ago, one of the first things I did was look at operations and figure out, where's the money coming from? I immediately honed in that a lot of our fees appeared low. I'm used to use permits being thousands of dollars and not hundreds of dollars. I had never seen a place where you could get a $33 public hearing. So those planning fees especially really honed in on the fact that we need to look at our fees closer. I went back and realized it had been several years, in fact, over a decade for one, group that we had not even taken any time to address or looked at. And I could not find any past fee studies, which is very important for that nexus with the amount of cost relative to the amount of labor and expense for those types of fees. We don't have the big box Target. We don't have the Home Depot. We don't have even Auburn Toyota. We cannot afford to subsidize to a great extent these things, which at this point We are subsidizing them extensively. We started this process. In fact, it was last April. I came to you and said, I think we need to look at this closer, and you granted me the ability to go forward with an RFP. We then secured ClearSource, who is going to be presenting tonight on their analysis, and with Harris. And so one of the things that was brought up earlier was AB 1600 fees, those impact fees for subdivisions. And no, we're not collecting them because we don't have them. So we're working with Harris through ClearSource to do an assessment of those. That is not being presented tonight. Tonight, we're only looking at the fees for the building and planning department relative to the applications and the costs therein incurred by the city or not incurred by the city or incurred through the applicant. Tonight, we have Terry Madsen with us. He will explain somewhat briefly in quite a few slides what happened, and I'm going to turn it over to Terry at this point.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council, for allowing me to participate on this topic. I know you have a very full agenda, so I'd like to walk through this item. I'll be sharing my screen. I have about a 30-slide presentation, but I will work very quickly through some of the slides and take a little longer with others. But I will just try and move quickly and allow you to have time to direct us to any areas that need additional details or questions you have. So I'll begin now by sharing my screen, and you should see that in just a moment. So I am hoping that you now see a PowerPoint presentation.
We do.
As I mentioned, it's about 30 slides. So if I jump through some faster than others, it's on purpose just to get you through this item and in acknowledgement of your full evening. So just briefly, we're going to be talking about fees in terms of the background for fee setting, some fundamentals and terminology that is applicable to communities throughout the state, and then what we're seeing specifically in Auburn, and then we'll talk through some next steps. So we are specifically examining what we would think of as development-related fees. And the idea here is that your own internal staff and contract service providers that you use, you are reviewing for permit issuance, and you are providing inspections to ensure safe, orderly, aesthetically pleasing development when it happens within the city limits. And what we find is that communities generally use fees and charges to offset the cost of providing those services. And the idea is that communities would use your general tax dollars to fund services that provide broad community-wide benefit. We typically think of these as public works services, public safety services, park maintenance services, and so forth. But because you have limited resource through your tax revenues and sort of a significant need, you use that limited resource as much as possible to provide services with broad community-wide benefit. And then when you find a direct receiver of service, for instance, I'm remodeling my kitchen, I am the beneficiary of that enhanced property value, I'm the enjoyer of the new kitchen and so forth. I am a direct receiver of benefit. So we typically try and offset the costs of providing that service so that other members of the community, other businesses aren't paying for my kitchen remodel, essentially. This study is limited to those two categories of fees that we would think of as primarily development-related fees. We're looking at building fees and planning fees, entitlement review, construction permit issuance, construction permit inspection, and plan review. It's really important to know what we're not examining. We're not thinking about taxes. We're not thinking about assessments. We're not thinking about utility rates. And we're not even thinking about like the infrastructure mitigation fees that come with new development. So very limited scope, and it's regulatory in nature, and it's sort of demand driven. When someone takes a specific action by code, we respond to those actions, and we are able to recover the cost of providing those services. So just briefly, why do we conduct these types of studies? Why do we examine fees? Why do we collect fees and so forth? Primarily, We're doing these types of studies to ensure that we comply with legal requirements. The California Constitution and the California Government Code help us understand fee setting. When we do recover the costs of these services, by definition, we are freeing up our general fund resources to be used to cover the cost of some other service. And then finally, I think this final bullet really is important. The idea of when I recover my cost of service or a greater share of my cost of service, it helps position me to continue to meet the service level expectations of the community. So as we grapple with how are we going to best use our resource, if we're recovering the cost of these services, it helps us continue to provide those services effectively. I mentioned the legal requirements. I just want to be clear that these are not taxes. They are fees for service and they are established by the city council. We just want to make sure we follow some parameters that are outlined in the code. And the idea here is that fees should correlate to the cost of service. So we shouldn't be biased towards someone's ability to pay. What we are saying is a more complex effort typically requires a higher cost of service than a less complex effort. And we don't want to charge people more than it costs us to provide the service. So we don't want to turn this into a profit making activity. Throughout the agenda item and occasionally in my presentation, I might reference these concepts of cost of service, cost recovery, and subsidy, just to make sure that we're all speaking the same language. I want to talk briefly through those because they are fundamental to fee setting. The idea of cost of service is these are service-based fees. So we're thinking about service being provided either by your own in-house staff or contract service providers or a combination of the two. But what we're trying to say is, what do we value time at? And how long does something typically take us to perform? So let's say we value time at $150 an hour and an activity takes us 2 hours to perform. We would say that's a $300 cost of service. If a different activity took us 4 hours to perform, we would say it's a $600 cost of service. The cost of service represents our ceiling, our maximum fee amount. And when we think about our cost of service, we're thinking what we reference as a fully burdened cost. So salaries, benefits, services, and supplies, associated indirect costs that help us provide these outward facing services to the community. That's what we're thinking about. And that is consistent. It's a consistent methodology used by communities throughout the state, not just Auburn as part of this study. We talked a little bit about cost recovery, but the idea here is that when we see a clear receiver of benefit, like a primary receiver of benefit, we typically target higher cost recovery levels. When benefit is seen as broad to the community, we target lower levels of cost recovery, typically. This is an important chart, and what it really expresses is that let's say Auburn has a cost of service. We in that one illustration, we said this activity costs us $300 to perform. If an activity costs Auburn $300 to perform, that is what the service costs. If we decide to collect a fee of $150, Auburn still incurred a cost of $300. What we would say is we have partial cost recovery. We received $150 in fees, but $150 in additional costs had to be covered from some other Auburn revenue source to meet that full cost of service. And typically, it would be your general tax dollars, sales tax, property tax, and so forth. That would be the primary mechanism that you would have to use to cover the difference between what you charge the receiver of service and what it actually costs the city to perform the service. So that is concepts that are consistent throughout the state. Now we'll talk specifically about what we're seeing in Auburn and some general recommendations for the city council to consider. We'll start with building fees and then we'll move to planning fees. And just as a reminder, your fee schedule includes numerous items, and that also is consistent with other agencies because you're trying to account for the various scenarios that could walk through your door in a given month, or even sometimes you may not see a scenario for a given year, but it is possible that you would see a request for certain activities because they're outlined in your municipal code. And so you want to categorize them in your fee schedule. So your fee schedule includes many items, too many to identify individually in this presentation, but they are in your agenda packet. But broadly, what we're seeing is that in the building world, we believe that we can restructure your building fees in a way that enhances the correlation between the service somebody is receiving and the fees that we are collecting to offset the cost of those services. We have examined the idea of if a smaller, less intensive request is made, would they pay a smaller fee in this fee schedule? And the answer is yes. And then secondarily, for the most common requests that you see, these sort of things that come through your door day after day, like a re-roof, HVAC change out, those kind of activities, service panel upgrade, establishing some fixed fees so that your contractors and your homeowners can sort of easily forecast what they're going to expect to pay rather than having something that's overly complex. From a cost recovery perspective, it depends on the fee. So we mentioned you have lots of fees. Some of your fees recover a significant portion of your cost of service, and others recover very little of your cost of service. What we're seeing is it depending on the fee, your building fees may range from 20% cost recovery today to basically full cost recovery. In the building world, the proposal that's before the city council is to move your building fees to full cost recovery. That is consistent with what we see in other communities, and it's consistent with expectations of even the BIA and your development communities. They are, when we work with them, they are not opposed to the idea of full cost recovery. They just want to make sure it's the costs of building that they're paying for, not other costs. And they're particularly concerned about service levels and so forth. So the idea of full cost recovery is these are items that are regulatory in nature. They are outlined in the California Building Code, and we do see a high level of direct benefit from these services with property enhancements, increased property values, and so forth. And so we want to, the proposal before you would minimize a subsidy of other residents and businesses paying for individual enhancements to property. On the planning fee side, planning is a more challenging exercise in the sense that you deal with a lot of hypothetical scenarios. You deal with time frames that may take months and sometimes even years to address, depending on the project complexity and order of magnitude and so forth. And so a lot of times we just see some varying cost recovery levels on the planning side, and you may have some other community goals and drivers that affect your targeted cost recovery levels, like desire to remain an area with high historic designation and cultural areas and so forth. So a lot of times those types of decisions influence cost recovery levels for planning. But what we can tell you is your current cost recovery levels on the planning side do appear to be at the low end of what we see typically, and you are even at the low end of your own regional fee spectrum. So most of the time what we're seeing is less than 30% cost recovery in your existing planning fees.
Sometimes 2%.
Yeah, so low cost recovery. You can adjust these fees. You can enhance cost recovery. You can do it without becoming a regional outlier. Because a lot of times that planning stage, there is this idea of, I want to collaborate with you. I want to encourage a certain type of development, and I understand these costs are significant. The idea is, and the idea of what we see in a lot of communities where you see significant under recovery and a long period of time between fee studies, occasionally there's this idea of a phase in. And so on the planning side, there is a phase-in proposed. There is some initial fee adjustments just to get you to like this base level of cost recovery. And then the idea is that you would make some ongoing predetermined adjustments over the next couple years. Observe patterns, observe community feedback, observe stakeholder feedback, and then make a decision at the end of 3 years. What do our updated cost recovery levels look like? Do we want to continue making some inflationary adjustments, or do we want to re-examine and consider some additional adjustments at that time? But so planning is a proposed 3-year phase in. And that cost recovery level, even in your proposed fees, it varies depending on the fee category. We'll show you some brief examples. That idea of historic designations, if somebody says, I would like you to consider this home for the possibility of historic designation, that's a review that's conducted by staff. There is a cost to that review. You have historically waived cost recovery. There is no proposal to change that at this time. A lot of communities target less than full cost recovery for appeals. You try and discourage them. You try and help people understand why decisions were made, but they are expensive to process if you do receive them. And so the idea is that it provides a mechanism for people to participate in the decision-making process without feeling like it's some sort of cost prohibitive item. So just different levels of cost recovery. And the idea here is as the development becomes more complex and sort of more developer driven, like environmental impact reports, property subdivisions, and so forth, general plan amendments, you target higher levels of cost recovery than you would for minor actions, things that you're amending existing permits or something like that, smaller projects. So when you're a city council and you're asked to make these types of decisions, the analysis can tell you, hey, we believe you could adjust these fees and comply with terms of the California Constitution and the California Government Code. But you may also say, I would be curious about if I do adopt the fees that are proposed, would I, how do I align to the region today? How do I align to the region today? And how might I align if I adopted these fees? And so the next few slides just show you a picture of that. And what we want to tell you is it would depend on the fee. So you have many, many fees. We could pick a fee and you might be at the higher end of the fee spectrum today. And we may pick a different fee and you're at the lower end of the fee spectrum. But what we're trying to do is find patterns, like fees that you can compare from agency to agency. They're very common amongst agencies. And so we can find them in other fee schedules and easily to compare. And we're looking for general pattern to help and where you stand tomorrow. And so this next handful of slides is going to show you that generally what we're seeing is whether it's on the building side of the shop or the planning side of the shop, you are not at the upper end of the fee spectrum, and you could adjust fees without becoming some sort of regional outlier. So I'll walk fairly quickly through these. Your city is in dark blue shading. Your current fee is outlined as current, and your proposed fee is identified as proposed. We were able to find Lincoln, Roseville, Rockland, Loomis, and Placer County as some comparison agencies that had similar fee structures that made it so we could readily compare. And what you see is this is for building permit and plan check. It's a handful of slides that show you at different levels of project complexity. So small project, medium project, large project. In the small project, you're just at the lower end of the spectrum, and we would move you into the mid range. Here, just getting a little bit larger, lower end of the spectrum, moving you into the mid range. Projects getting a little larger, same pattern though. Idea is that even after fee adjustment and aligning to your current cost of service, you would become in the middle of the fee range. In this larger projects, what you see is several agencies all within $500 or $1,000 of each other in terms of large scale development. So very small fees as compared to the size of the project. And you are consistent with other agencies. Same thing here. You may not see more than a handful of these over time, but you could adjust without becoming a regional outlier. On the planning side, the comparisons get more difficult because you may not all offer the same services, or you may not categorize them the same and so forth, and you may have different cost recovery levels. But we did try our best to find several categories that we could see from agency to agency. And what we see is Auburn today at the lower end of the spectrum with room for significant adjustment. And it's just a matter of how far do you want to go overnight. But this is the proposal that takes you to a certain cost recovery level and then a continued phase-in approach. And what you see is you can do this without becoming a regional outlier again. And this is what I want to say is the regional fee comparison comes at the conclusion of a fee study, so it does not influence our cost of service analysis. We prepare a cost of service analysis and we identify proposed fees in line with general industry standards, what we see in other agencies and so forth. And then we look at those comparisons compared to the region to see if anything jumps out at us as, hey, this feels bizarre or something that needs further examination. But over and over, we're just seeing this consistent trend. So if the city council was to adopt these changes, the fiscal impact would depend on what comes through the door next year, whether the development cycle changes and so forth. But we believe the anticipated general fund enhanced cost recovery from this would be in the range of $50,000. And what's most important to note is that this is to offset costs that are already being incurred by the city. It's not to fund an expanded level of service. It's to offset costs that exist already. If the council did decide to move forward and adopt this updated schedule of fees, you would do it at the conclusion of the public hearing. And because these are development related fees, you would have them go into effect not sooner than 60 days after adoption of this item. Thank you so much. This concludes my presentation. If you have any questions or feedback, I'm available to continue to support you.
Thanks for that, Terry. I just want to point out real quick, we talked about full actuarial cost, and when we're dealing with the building side, those costs like water heater replacement, HVAC, those are set lower because what we found in the industry is that if you set the cost of your permit higher than the cost of the appliance that you're replacing, that you traditionally don't get people coming through the door to get permits. And of course, we want to encourage them for life, health, safety, and all the reasons we do permitting. So those ones were set lower intentionally on that. Also with the phasing plan, you know, what you showed on slide 19, those fees are set to go up incrementally for the next 2 years by 10%, should you grant us that ability to. So those will slowly shift over as well. And I will resign to questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Sorry. Thank you for your presentation. Questions out?
I have a lot, but if you want to go first, I mean, I've gone first before, so.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it. My question is, so the anticipated savings is $50,000. And is that based on the building permits that we've had in the past? And we anticipate about the same in the future?
Yeah, that's what we do is we look at your current cost recovery and then assuming the exact same projects came in the door, what might your cost recovery look like tomorrow under these adjusted fee scenarios? And that's what we found.
Okay. And how many, just this last year, how many building permits came through?
I could not answer that off the top of my head. Would have to get you that
In
information.
the hundreds or?
I know that the subdivision agreement that you guys, the improvements, that was 24 lots, and those all have building permits on them currently.
Okay. So I guess my question is, does it deter new building or, to come into town?
So what you have to receive this as an editorial comment. And not like some matter of fact, but I feel like you are asking me, do we have experience with adjustment of fees, and do we have thoughts about that? So I am giving you my general thoughts, and they're based on what we've heard from other agencies and even what we've seen in terms of regional fee comparisons. So these fees represent a very small portion of the total costs of development. And in another area of California, we are hired to do a regional fee comparison of if I wanted to build this house and do this project type, what would it cost me in this agency and this agency and this agency and this agency and so forth. And what we found is that it appears that zip code, public safety, access to highways, those are what drives development, not whether you change your fee to recover your cost of service. Because what we found is in these agencies where we did the regional fee comparison, oftentimes the agency with the lowest fees still had the lowest request for development applications, and an agency with the highest fees had the highest requests for development applications. So there wasn't a correlation with fees equals no development.
Okay, thank you.
And if I
then-
may, Councilwoman Amara, just
Yes.
to also firsthand experience, we'll say this is fact. I've actually heard people at the front counter saying, wow, that's all. You know, they go to Rockland, Roseville, and they're saddled with much larger fees. And again, we're just looking at cost recovery and we're not looking at just random fees. But as far as what we've been presenting to the public has been considered low, even by contractors.
Okay,
And
that's
just
good to hear.
quickly as well. He mentioned Loomis. Loomis, when I started, our fees were not updated for like 20 years. And so we updated them maybe 2 years before I left. We saw zero decrease and actually saw more of an increase than anything else. So
Good.
it's not, like you said, it's not correlated with the fee. The other thing to consider is the opposite could be true, where if your fees aren't high enough, the general public is subsidizing all of that other stuff, which isn't fair either. So
Yeah. I just get a lot of complaints from my contractor friends that, wow, there's a lot of fees and wow, it's expensive to build here. But it's expensive to build in California. So yeah, and it was daunting to see all these fees. I'm looking at this going, wow, it made me dizzy. But then the next page, like on page 194, so it has, if I understand that right, so total valuation. So if someone came to Auburn and wanted to do $1 million home, their fees initially would be about $7,000, all the
Correct.
fees, every single one.
The
And
block,
that would be for the new building and for mechanical, electrical, plumbing, everything.
no,
right?
so
Am I reading
the assessment there is for the building permit itself. The mechanical, electrical would be in addition to, but there's a factor in the fee schedule. If you go to the actual fee schedule itself, it's multiplied by 0.10% against that initial, or excuse me, 0.10 against that initial cost. And that's where you get that amount from.
Okay, so that doesn't include everything. It's.
Nope. But that's just the base fee for the building permit. And then the HVAC, the mechanical HVAC, all those come in addition to.
Okay, on page, what page is that?
Same page. Page 194.
Oh, I see the bottom. Okay, yes, I see that. Okay, thank you. Okay.
You really, I know it's daunting, but you have to have a menu of things for people to choose from because the contractors expect those things. And honestly, if you look at our fee schedule, it's actually fairly rudimentary compared to some other fee schedules that I've seen that are much more comprehensive, sliding scales for all kinds of different things and much more complex.
Thank you. That's good to hear. So yeah, that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate the fact that we've finally undertaken this, at least this fee study for the building and the planning department. And I'm looking forward to the subsequent work to take a look at those fees as well. As a fiscal conservative, I will say that it is important, as this you stated this in the study, I hear this all the time, that fees should correlate to the cost of service. We are all of us here on the council are certainly aware that the California Business Roundtable is proposing a ballot measure that would change the way in which fees are assessed by local government. And one of their points in that ballot measure is the fact that the cost of the fees should equate to the service and that shouldn't go over. So I want to use that same example here is that the fee should correlate to the cost of service. And so I appreciate that on the building side, I think, let's see here, I think you have most of those at 100%. But you did answer the fact that
Not
you
the
did,
first year.
yeah, on the building, you did talk about that for HVAC or water heater, those are at 65%.
Right.
And you had said that you were concerned that the fee would be more than the equipment itself and might deter people from getting a permit. You know, I can appreciate that those are things that perhaps we wouldn't know if someone is doing that, but if someone's replacing their roof, we're going to know. That's a big thing. So I see that's at 75%. I really would not want to see anything that's lower than 75%. I think, you know, again, we're looking at the cost of service. And so in order for a fee to go down, I think that there should be an analysis to determine the exact cost for that service. I don't want to pay more, you know, so I want to make sure that we are clear that this is what the cost of service is to perform the particular function for which we're charging. And if that service, we could do it cheaper, then the fee itself should be cheaper. So I want to make that clear. But on the planning side, actually, it's on the building side. Actually planning side. There's a couple of points, and I respect the fact that we don't want to be, I think you called it an outlier fee agency or what have you. But some of these fees, cost recovery is still really low. And I look at page, it's kind of hard to see these pages. I think it's page 2. Is that page 298? It's 230, is that 298? 238, sorry, it's written in the appendix thing. I look at administrative permit to approve a project, 50%. Short-term rental with public hearing, 50%. Amendment in the historic district, new construction, 25%. I understand that you talked about the historic, but still only 25%. Appeals, 15% of cost recovery. I absolutely believe that we should be charging 100% of cost recovery for appeals. They can be incredibly expensive. And a lot of times people don't understand that and they just file because they don't like something. They don't have any specific evidence against something. They just don't like it. And 15% cost recovery to me is just not prudent and it's not responsible. And others should not be bearing the cost to subsidize that. So I would want to see that the appeals move to 100%, unless you can tell me why it shouldn't be 100%. I don't understand why. Why 15%? We don't want to deter, don't want to deter appeals?
It's not that you don't want to deter appeals. I think there's a combination. So we're not opposed to an amount that is higher than what is shown in this document, but I will say, and this can confirm, I think if you did ask higher than what is shown, you'd have to renotice this item because we'd be essentially asking the public for more than we had originally noticed. So you would be delaying this process. But the idea behind some of these changes is it's a near-term adjustment. Like an appeal fee is already being proposed to increase by over 200% from current levels. And so it's a matter of how much can you bear over, do you want to increase it by over 1,000% in one evening? Or do you want to do it, what you think is, hey, the idea behind fee studies a lot of times when some agency hasn't done them in a number of years is we say the goal is not perfection. The goal is moving forward and then monitoring how were my actions received and what else can I do to enhance. And so a fee schedule should not remain static for 10 years. It should be a dynamic document that the council reviews on an ongoing basis.
I will say that I understand that and I respect that. And I know that we haven't done this for a long time, but again, we were collecting, the cost recovery was a 4%. You know, and those appeals cost us money. And I appreciate what the optics might look like. We're going to increase it by a certain percent, but right now this city is in such fiscal duress that it is important that people are paying their way. Because if that means to be able to keep a firefighter or have somebody pay a less appeal cost, I'm going to fight for that firefighter 100%. So I appreciate trying to be sensitive about that, but again, we are in a situation of enormity here. And to me, I think people should need to pay their way. I will try to be respectful of that. A question I do have for you, because you do propose a 10% increase over the next 2 years. I cited this California Business Roundtable proposal. Does this match that? Because if that proposal were to go on the ballot, which of course the California Supreme Court is now under review, we should have a decision by June 27th. But if this is to go on the ballot and passes, does this proposal meet the requirements of that? Because if it didn't, we'd have to do it all over and again. And I don't.
So I would say that this study is based on the law as it is currently written. It is based on the law as it exists today. It does not
take that into consideration. Okay, so I appreciate that. But then I also we need to be clear that if that proposal were to make it on the ballot and pass, it would retroactively reverse this. Everything would be reversed that didn't comply with the provisions of that ballot measure, just as a FYI. I'm not. Yes.
No, yeah, and I don't mean to interrupt. I just have 2 comments on this.
Mhm.
First is I agree with the procedural comment on the fees if they were to be adjusted on what's in here. But your administrative enforcement ordinance does require a fee for any appeal, but it allows a waiver or a reduction of that upon good cause shown. So that's already in your municipal code. So if you did have a higher appeal fee, there is a process for allowing an individual person to show good cause and have that reduced.
So if we were able to move that up to 100% cost recovery and someone comes in and they are able to demonstrate some kind of a hardship, we already have the ability to waive that.
That's correct.
With that said, I mean, I'm sorry to monopolize this, but I have a lot of comments on this because of our fiscal situation. But I think that at least those appeal fees need to be raised to actual cost. For all things, I cannot approve something that's only going to get recovery for 15%. Especially, with planning appeals, I know how costly those are, CEQA. They're very costly. And to me, those absolutely need to be up. I know that we're talking about a 10% increase every year to help us get to where we need to be. But again, I'm looking on page 239, remodeling, alterations, remodeling, 33%, 25%. And we're going from where we were before, which was 9%, which is, I think, to your point, Jonathan, that, in some instances we're collecting nothing. So I'm just concerned that it's not getting us to the actual close enough to that proposed cost recovery. Again, this would equate to an additional 50, the way this proposal's fee schedule is proposed now, it gets us about an extra 50 grand. Again, I'm not about wanting to raise fees. I just think that that people need to pay what the cost of service is for the service that they're getting. I don't want to be, if you can show me, if there's examples where we're going to be way, outlier, like, $2,000 beyond Roseville, I can take that into consideration, but,
I don't think you would be. I think you could adjust. I think you could adopt fees we could not by scope compare every single fee, but the study is saying your hourly rates that we calculated, your cost of service do not seem unreasonable. So if you wanted to move them to full cost recovery sort of immediately, we would have no opposition to that.
And I'm not specifically opposed to a phased approach, but again, that is not consistent with the California Business Roundtable proposal measure. And we just have to know we'd have to redo it to kind of help people get adjusted. But it needs to be closer. It needs to be closer now and then closer next year. And then, so that we are much closer to that cost recovery. I think anything below 75%, to me, I have a concern with, unless you can demonstrate why. I mean, there needs to be a justification in my mind why it should be less than 75% for the specific. And so I know that this kind of throws a wrench into this because anytime you adjust any of these proposals, we're going to have to renotice anyway. But I just think that we need to, I guess for me, what I would like to see is a justification as to why anything that's under 75% is why we're proposing just 25% or 50, 30%.
No,
Um,
can I add that we started this a year ago? And so
Yeah.
this was before, and we were wrapping these things up when we got the mid-year budget report back. And then this was tonight's, item number 13 wasn't even in existence when we were wrapping the final version of this up. So I appreciate your comments. I'm just letting you know that this was the way we were working a year ago. Moving.
And I appreciate that. And I'm not angry. I guess I'm just reacting to this, like I said, our situation now. And I'm very grateful that we actually took the time to take a look at this because like you said, it's been so long. And so I do really appreciate that. But I guess I would just need more of a justification for myself why we're not going to charge more for some of these. Again, we should never be charging more than an actual cost of service. And if there's a way to adjust that cost of service, i.e. less amount of time necessary to review something, I'm all for that. Instead of it taking 2 hours to do an inspection, if it only takes an hour, I'm game. That's awesome. Then the cost goes down. But, really that's my biggest comment is just with regards to that. And then also an annual review, most folks do an annual review for their fees. I know that costs money too, though. And that's one of the reasons why we haven't done this because it's an expensive process. So, we're lucky that we, I guess, did it in 10 years. Is that when was the last time? I don't.
2011.
Oh, okay.
Right here.
Yeah, in addition to the annual review, the resolution does have a CPI that will happen automatically and direct staff to do.
Yes, and I was going to mention that too.
Yeah.
There should be a CPI to
Yeah.
at least adjust to the cost of living.
So there is in the resolution effective at the beginning of each fiscal year. So staff would do that if this resolution were to be adopted
Could be,
administratively.
between 1% and 5% based on CPI, and I understand that. So again, for me, I really would like to just have a stronger justification for why we're not proposing more than 30% or 50% for some of these. I mean, anything to me under 75%, I just need to have that justification as to why we're not going to go after that higher rate of cost of recovery for the actual cost of the services provided. So thank you.
Councilman Holmes?
Yes, I have a question about some of these inspections and services may be done by a current employee of the city, or they may be done by somebody that's contracted with the city to do it. Am I
Correct.
correct? So would there be a difference then in the cost of the service by a contractor than somebody who's actually an employee of the city?
Absolutely. Be a higher cost for the contractor, but we have worked to build the department. That was part of the reason I put together this fee structure, was to make sure that we could support the current staffing levels that we have there, because we do a lot of it internally now. We're able to do our own plan reviews, where just several months ago we had 60% to 90% going out to contract. So, but yes, there's a definite difference in the cost.
Okay, thank you.
That all of your questions? Okay. Councilwoman Sierra Salem?
Well, I wasn't here when this project first started, but I do appreciate all the work that was put into it. I work for a county department that goes through these studies quite a bit. And it is a little concerning that we're not recovering all the cost. And Councilwoman Dowden Cabillo really hit a subject that is something I pretty much do in my everyday work, and that is appeals. And I would say 10 out of 10 times, we don't recoup the cost, in our assessment appeals. So I am working dozens of hours for each case, and we're charging $40 for an appeal. So when I see these costs and the amount of recovery, that, like Councilwoman Alice said, I don't quite understand why the recovery cost is so low. I understand that not everything is going to be 100%. It should be, but I understand why it's not. But when something like that is so low, like I said, I'm just trying to wrap my head around why, when an appeal usually does take quite a bit more time because you've got someone that's already done the work. And then I would think that you have someone coming in, not necessarily does all the work again, but just takes a deeper dive, which takes more time to one single case. And so why you would only recover, not even 25% of that, that just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, if it can be explained, and I understand that's already a big jump that we're seeing. And I know that we would be able to phase in higher costs. I'm just, it's a big jump, but it doesn't seem like it's enough to recover our cost. And that would be with any budget situation that we have, whether we're evergreen or broke.
Right. It's been my experience with the appeal fees that you actually set them low because it's unlike your situation where you're going through an appeal on a value of the property that you otherwise are disputing. Most people that do appeals is because they're in a position where their neighbor is doing something that they're not happy with. They were put in that position. And so usually councils are sympathetic to the fact that, they didn't cause the problem, so they shouldn't be paying an exorbitant amount. I think that you're going to find if we raise them too high that we're going to get a lot of waivers and probably level out at some point to being a lower cost recovery anyways, because people are going to claim hardship.
And I understand that. It's just, I guess that would be my second question as to how many waivers have we granted? I mean, because, that seems subjective as well, or at least it brings the possibility of it being subjective.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that. So the standard in the municipal code is a written request for good cause shown, and it has to include severe economic hardship, significant attempts to comply with the notice of violation and or the abatement order, or other good faith attempts to comply. And the city manager is the one who makes that. So if an application came in, there would need to be evidence that would support that. And then the city manager would look at it and apply those standards and decide whether or not to grant the waiver. I'm not aware of any waiver requests, but that's probably because your current appeal fee is about $100.
And in case it helps the city council in your decision making, again, we have no preference, but just to inform you, if you look at the proposed fee schedule for the appeal section, there is a footnote that says for an appellant to file, this is the appeal filing fee, but it also notes that if we are using specialized counsel to review this appeal, specialized peer review, or any sort of outside service providers that we need in order to help us process this appeal, which is where the majority of our costs would come from, the appellant is responsible for covering those costs. So we do target cost recovery for specialized services to process the appeal.
So I didn't see that. I don't see that in the schedule.
It's subject of the appeal, specialized expertise may be solicited at the expense of the applicant for the purpose of
Where
providing
is
input to
that?
the city manager.
I'm just, so I can look at that language. Where is that? Because I'm looking at the fee schedule and I don't see it in the schedule. Where am I not seeing that? Where is it listed?
207
207?
at the bottom. If you see asterisk with the footnote there.
Footnote B is in boy.
Yep, B is in boy.
It's tiny. Yeah.
Depending on the subject of the appeal, specialized expertise may be solicited at the expense of the applicant for the purpose of providing input to the city manager, planning commission, or other commission or board or city council.
Okay.
I still don't think that's enough, really. I mean, that's just saying if we need to go above and beyond what we normally would, then we could charge you. And so I respect that there might be a tiny bit of flexibility in there, but I don't, just for a generic appeal. Sorry.
Councilwoman Sierra Sammons, is that the end of your questions? Do you have more?
That was it. No, I do appreciate the work and I
I do
support
too.
this.
I do too.
Thank you. I also appreciate the work. I know when I first got on council, I saw the fees and I work in cost of service in the utility industry and I was really pushing for us to do the study. So I'm very excited that it's finally done and we actually have something to look at as a basis of comparison and can show that we need to be increasing those fees. I also agree that being in the cost of service world, that people should pay for the costs that are being incurred on their behalf, that we shouldn't be subsidizing those. Or if we are, maybe we create a grant program so it's more transparent versus it just being taken off the top in the fee structure. Maybe we create a grant program for people who are low income or have other needs to help them with those things. But this doesn't create the transparency that it really costs us this, but we're gonna pay out of the general fund to subsidize it X amount. And so maybe there's a way of being able to show that in a more transparent way. I do think that we should proceed forward with this tonight because it's better to have something than nothing. And if we take this back to the drawing board and start again, it'll take a while. And then that whole time we'll be waiting to have fees. So I think this should go forward, but I also would like to, by January 1st of what are we going into, 2025? Have something in place that I think would increase it the next level. Like, can we start that process now? So that way, I'm not saying we're going to redo any of the studies. I just want to be able to move up those numbers that we consider are too low. And so I would like to put this in place, but have kind of a timeline for us to bring this back, go through this public process again to possibly increase these fees. The 10%'s in here. I don't think that's fast enough. I don't think that increases at the amount that we should and I think it's going to be more specific than 10% across the board because some fees, Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo has showed that maybe those ones need to get increased, but maybe not all of them need to get increased an X percentage. So I would recommend that we move forward tonight, that we get these fees in place because they're at least moving us in the right direction, but that we that we work together with staff to come up with numbers that we feel are maybe more appropriate to make sure that we're getting that cost recovery for our residents that we think is appropriate, and then hopefully get it in place by maybe the beginning of next year based on, staff's ability to do that. I don't know if there's anything that would impede us from doing it that quickly, but what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, the timing to increase them more than, if we're just putting an inflator onto it, that's an easy thing to do, 10%. It also includes a CPI, so it'd be, I think it's 10% plus the CPI, is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. There's a couple fees in here that ramp up over 3 years, right? And so one way to do this would be to approve what you just said, right? Approve what we have here now, so that way we have fees, and something is there, including the CPI and including the 10%. And then at the end of that 3-year ramp up, do a complete new look at it, and then bring that back with 100% cost recovery.
I don't
So
really want to wait the 3 years.
It does take longer.
It takes a long time. Is there anything that would prohibit us if we pass this now from coming back in 6 months or a year and ramping things up faster than what we say here?
Legally, no.
Okay.
And we have the Nexus study done, so we can use that as our basis for analysis and bringing
Yeah,
this back.
we don't have to do a study again. We can just, these were the numbers you thought were appropriate. Maybe we aren't in complete agreement that they're high enough, but that doesn't make that, but we won't have to redo everything. We would just come to an agreement on what we think those are appropriate numbers. So maybe you could come back to us in a couple months and we could have more of a conversation on what we view as appropriate, so you don't have to guess. Does that sound like a reasonable way of moving forward?
I mean, if the direction from council is to look at bringing back 100% cost recovery, there's not much else to talk about.
I don't know if all of them need to be 100%. I'm just saying, I think that there's some that we feel should be higher than they are on here. And so maybe we have that conversation about what we think is appropriate. Like I work in the world of water heaters. If you put the fee too high, people just don't get permits.
right.
So I totally agree with that. But there's other ones that were pointed out tonight that maybe it would be appropriate to have them slightly higher, faster than the 3 years. So I just want to have that conversation. So I want to get these in place because we need to have some fees.
Right.
But maybe we can have that conversation a little quicker. And if we find some common ground on a few ones, then we can increase those.
So Madam,
Do that, you can increase? I thought you said we have to stick with this for 3 years.
No, the city attorney just said that we don't have to stick with it.
You can change it.
We can change it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do not have to stick with what you have here for 3 years. So if you adopt this tonight, you could bring back a separate resolution after a notice public hearing and increase them above, provided that you're meeting the other requirements for fees. So can't exceed the cost of providing the service, the other concepts that have already been discussed tonight.
Yeah.
So for some of these, the same fee study will work
Right.
because you already are showing that your fee could be higher than what's in your report tonight. So there shouldn't be much more analysis involved. There's a public hearing and another resolution, but you could increase them
And
up to that full 100%.
That's my point. And with all due respect, Madam Mayor, I understand that some of these fees are so low right now, but I'm concerned about just delaying this even more. We've got on the horizon, our budget deficit is so significant. I just don't want to wait. I feel like we should be able to bring back the fees that are not at, we can even just say a number, not at 75%. I understand that not all the fees have to be 100%, but a justification for why those fees that are not at 75% are not at a higher amount. We already have the data. We have this information. It's just a, quick, okay, well, why are we only suggesting this be 30%? Because of X. Why is this one 50%? Because of Y. I'm concerned too about, we raise the fees today and then we're going to look at it in June or what have you. I would just prefer to do it all at one time because I get concerned about things getting lost. And again, we have to start working on the budget. We have to pass a budget by June. And so the budget's going to be based on whatever fees. If we were to adopt that today, it's going to be based on this number. And again, if we're talking about, the general fund would be subsidizing these fees, and the general fund is what is at jeopardy. And we have to make very, very difficult decisions on what we're doing with the general fund money. And so I really need to see these fees. And again, I am a fiscal conservative. I'm right there, but they need to be at the cost of service. We as a city cannot afford to subsidize them and at anything less, in my opinion, less than 75%, unless you can specifically show me why. Again, I'm willing to listen to an argument. I even want to see 85%. If you can demonstrate, then I'll hear it, but I don't see that here just based on my data. And I really don't think that we should adopt this today. I think it sends the wrong message. I do appreciate what you're saying, but that we're okay with subsidizing, the general fund subsidizing these things when we should be collecting a much higher rate. And I don't say this against staff. Again, I know that you began this process a year ago. And you know what? A year ago was a lot different. We were looking at a very, very different forecast. And I don't blame staff for coming up with these proposals, but I'm just saying that we as a council, we need to be responsible and we need to be accountable. And I cannot.
And I don't think any of us, by passing this tonight, are not being responsible or accountable. I think that we're saying that we would like to get some fees in place and that we would like to have staff bring back fees that are higher, but we don't want to delay the process so we don't have fees in place. And to be perfectly honest, this is not going to solve our budget problems. We've got much bigger fish that we have to fry and things we have to talk about and problems we have to solve. And so trying to put that extra $10,000 in faster, though I appreciate $10,000 is important, but we need to have we can't put all of that on Jonathan's team.
And
So
I-
we
I
need
do
to
appreciate that.
we need to let them move forward and get their job done. They've spent a lot of time on this, and we can have those conversations. But if that conversation you're talking about is not as simple as just bringing it back next meeting, it's going to take a while, and then they're not going to have any fees to put in place.
And
I don't
I'd
know.
like to
Sorry,
weigh in on this
Councilwoman.
too. I mean, you've said it 3 times and we have to look at everything. Everything's on the table, roads, everything. So we have to look at this, but I think this is a start. We have an analysis. We have to get going on this. And I think it's a very prudent start. I'm not going to sit here and try and, I want to hear everything. I don't know if raising appeals is a good or bad thing. I would like to do some research on that. I'm not ready to make a decision on something like that. Also, will that put us, if we put everything at 100%, wouldn't that put us way above Rockland in your analysis? I mean, we'd be at the top of the line in terms of how we stand with other cities. Is
It
that-
would depend on the fee examined. It would, in some areas, you probably would be at the higher end of the spectrum, and in others, you may still remain in the middle. It depends on the fee.
I'd like to see
So-
that data to have that conversation too.
Yeah, that would be included in that discussion. I agree. Again, I said there might be justification for not having something at 100%, and I'm
So,
willing to hear.
so just my bottom line is I agree with the mayor that we need to get going. It's not going to solve all of our problems. It's a start. It's a fair start. It's prudent for us to do this and look at it, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the analysis. And I'm prepared to go forward tonight with the caveat that I'm in agreement if we want to come back and look at and have some real good input and have some time to look at closely at all this, then I'd be willing to, look at a modification if necessary.
Are there any more comments or questions? Okay. Then, public comment. Is there any public comment on this issue? Sorry, we had so much commenting right now.
We'll probably have some more comments.
I'm sure.
Let me move out of your space.
Hi, Glenn Kramer, El Oro Drive. This is why I really came here tonight. So when I was chairing the annexation committee, one of the things that we encouraged the council to do was look at the fee structure based with the county to comparison, because when you're doing any kind of a long-term campaign, you really want to make sure that you're in line with those types of fees. And it looks like staff has done a very good job in doing that. The one item that struck me was the annexation line, which is on page 238. Right now, there's a $500 deposit, and then there's actual cost ultimately. But now it's being proposed that you do a $7,500 deposit. And it seems to me that that would have a chilling effect on any kind of small annexation that you wanted to have. So I would suggest that you keep the deposit at 500 unless staff has some other thinking on it. Because you still have the actual cost that's going to be recovered. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comment on this item? Oh, yes. I wasn't sure you were coming up for public comment.
Donna Silva, a resident and also the city treasurer. I want to applaud the council and staff for bringing this item forward tonight. I think it's wonderful that the council is committed to ensuring that people pay for the cost of service. I think it's important. I pay my taxes gladly and willingly, but I pay those taxes for things to be subsidized for the greater good of the community. I don't pay those taxes to subsidize something that benefits one specific person or one specific business. So I'm very hopeful that the council ultimately gets to a majority of the fees being 100% cost recovered. There are times when some level of subsidy might be warranted where you have to put the needs of safety over the needs of cost recovery, such as in the situation of a water heater. But in general, I believe strongly in full cost recovery, and I'm really happy to see the council examining that and leaning in that direction. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the council. First, I wanted to check, would it be possible for us to look at that annexation fee if you brought back as well? I mean, it would be changed for a short period of time, but would it be possible for us to look
The
at? what
annex fee is just the deposit for, that
annex
goes
deposit.
towards that. Yeah, we actually have to pay LAFCO out of that. There's significantly higher fees that are associated with an annexation. That's
Okay.
baseline.
Okay. Well, we could look
So
at that
we
like all the other fees when you bring it back if we wanted to. Okay. Okay. Are there any final comments that anyone would like to make? Okay. Oh, please do. All right. We're opening back up public comment.
Relative to those deposits, I'm sure what the city is looking at right now, in addition to improving your fiscal health, is also improving your efficiency. And I'm guessing that the reason that the deposit is being proposed to increase is because it's just woefully inadequate to cover the fees the majority of the time. So anytime you assess a deposit that's too low, you're putting the staff in the position of having to bill and monitor a receivable and go after collections. And then you risk non-collection. It's very laborious and inefficient. So that was one thought. And my other thought that I forgot to mention is there's user fees that the city has, I'm sure, beyond the planning department. So I'm curious to know if there's plans in place to do a full user fee study, looking at business licenses, non-sufficient check charges, kind of looking at the police department. There's fees in all the other departments that I'm sure haven't been looked at in a long time. So I would recommend and hope the city would be looking at those soon as well.
I think there's been a good trend within the city that we know that all of our fees have been low. Fire went and did their fees, and now planning's doing their fees. I think in general, everyone's looking to make sure that cost of service is covered, but it's kind of, we're doing it incrementally by
Got it.
department.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there any other public comment? Okay, then I'm going to bring it back to the council. Are there any additional comments before we do a motion? Okay, then I'm going to make a motion to approve, let's see, sorry, let me get back to the language. In the, there we go. To approve the
Staff's
the
recommended.
staff's recommendation for the fee schedule update, and also to request that item, that the fees come back to the council in the next few months.
We'll bring it back at a future date.
For us to discuss the possibility of recovering more of that cost of service for each of the items.
I'll second that.
I would make a substitute motion that we actually not move forward tonight. Instead, we bring this back to staff and ask them to expedite a proposal back to us that justifies why fees would not be set at least 75% cost effectiveness.
I don't know how we proceed. Can you help me?
There need to be a second to
Okay.
substitute, and if there is, then you would vote on your substitute before your main motion.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Okay, seeing none, then we're going to, did we second? We didn't. Did we do a
I
second?
seconded
You
the
seconded,
first
right?
one.
Okay. So then we are gonna have a roll call vote. Madam Clerk?
On the original motion to approve the resolution, Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
No.
Amara.
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
Sierra Sammons.
Aye.
Mayor Riddell Harris.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay.
Madam Mayor, if I
We're-
may request that we ask staff to expedite still the review of the fee schedule to bring back those fees that are less than 75%.
Yes, the staff will bring that back. We're gonna be in budget time, but I'm hopefully soon after the budget time is over, they could bring that back and we can have that conversation and get that process moving. Does that work for you? Both of you? Yep, okay. I'm going to have us take a, I don't know, 7-minute break.
Okay, 7 minutes.
So we're gonna be back at 8:23, so we can all take a minute, stretch our legs and use the restroom. Thank you.
Seven-minute break.
All right, let me know when we're ready to go. Okay, I'm gonna wait a second. Okay, welcome back from our brief intermission. We have now moved on to business items for tonight. Item number 12, the California Asset Management Program Camp Investment Trust.
Good evening, Mayor and council members and public. Donna Silva, I'm City Treasurer. I'd like to start off with a little bit of background about this item. The City of Auburn has an investment policy, a council-approved investment policy, like every other city. That investment policy serves to establish the investment objectives for the city and for its portfolio, and it is constrained by the government code. Your investment policy is as permissive for your investments as is allowed by the government code. The government code and your investment policy have established objectives for the portfolio, and they are listed in your policy in order of importance. So the number one objective of the city's investment policy is safety of funds. We are talking about investing other people's money, and those monies are used to pay for the services and the infrastructure necessary to keep the city running and keep it a vibrant community. So making sure that those funds are safe and are safely invested is paramount. The number two objective of the investment policy is liquidity. The city needs to make sure that it has access to funds when it needs them. And the investment policy and the government code prevent the city from investing in any investment vehicle that has a duration longer than 5 years. So you can't invest in anything longer than 5 years. So the city's cash and investments are currently held in a combination of various checking accounts, and two what's called local government investment pools. One is the Placer County Investment Pool, and the other is the Local Agency Investment Fund, otherwise known as LAIF. Back in November, the council asked me to investigate, to explore ways to increase the yield on the city's portfolio, including looking into potentially hiring an investment advisor or investment manager to have an actively managed portfolio for the city to see if we could maximize returns for the city. And so I did so. I reached out to PFM. PFM Asset Management is an investment advisor firm registered with the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. I have worked with them for over 15 years, providing those services to local governments. They provide investment services to over 190 different public agencies, and they're responsible for over $229 billion in investments for those agencies. They're a very well-known and very widely used investment advisory firm for local government. And so I had several conversations with them where we were talking about the city of Auburn. I was kind of letting them know about the city, about the department, about the current portfolio, and about council's desire to maximize yields. And after those conversations, we both kind of came to an agreement that an actively managed portfolio may not be in the best interest of the city. And I'll explain that. So in an actively managed portfolio, the city would be regularly buying and selling individual investments such as corporate notes and bonds, treasury bills, T-notes, municipal bonds, a plethora of different investment vehicles. And every one of those transactions, the purchase and the sale, have to be recorded in the general ledger by staff. And when it's sold, you have to recognize a gain or loss. In addition, every month that portfolio has to be marked to market. So you have to do an a journal entry to recognize the unrealized gain or loss of the portfolio. And it creates a significant amount of work. And the city of Auburn has a small finance team that is doing really good now under Gretchen Johnson's leadership, but historically has had a hard time even staying current with bank reconciliations. So I fear that the capacity is not here to manage an active portfolio. In addition, in an active portfolio, you're still operating under the same constraints as you are in a local government pool like LAIF, because you still have the same constraints on what types of investments you can purchase and the duration of those investments. But on top of that, you're paying a fee to the investment advisor. Typically, those fees are paid monthly based on the value of the portfolio. So they are incentive, they do have an incentive to maximize the yield and the value of the portfolio, but you do pay for that. And so in these conversations with PFM, they recommended that the city utilize the CAMP, the California Asset Management Program, which PFM manages. And the CAMP pool was created back in 1989 by two public agencies seeking to maximize their yield. And it has a 7-member board of trustees. All of them are members of other public agencies. And so that they are accountable solely to its public agency members with the goal of maximizing yield while maintaining safety and liquidity. There's 2 ways that you can participate in the CAMP pool. One is just by utilizing the pool, which is very similar to LAIF and the county and the Placer County pool, where there's no restrictions on how much money you can put in. There's no restrictions on how frequently you can put your money in or take your money out. You don't record the individual transactions within the pool. You just record your quarterly interest or your monthly interest on the pool. So it's very liquid. And it's very efficient. And what's great about the CAMP pool is that it actually gives a higher yield than both LAIF and the county pool. When I wrote this report for you, the CAMP pool was returning 5.44% interest. LAIF was returning 4.3%, and the county pool was returning 3.34%. So it's a pretty good jump between what we currently have and what we can get in the CAMP pool. In addition, and I think what's interesting and makes the CAMP program attractive is this CAMP term option. So in the CAMP term section of the program, the city can actually buy a specific investment, kind of like you would if you had an actively managed portfolio. The duration of it is for a year, so we would be locking in those funds for a year, but you would also be locking in the rate of return. So you could buy something at, say, 5.5% interest, and you know you're going to get that for the next year. So it's attractive if we have that much money that we can lock up for a year. Whereas in the pool, you have the liquidity, but the yield fluctuates with the market. So you don't quite have that guarantee from one month to another like you do in CAMP term. So CAMP term seems like a good alternative for the city. There are 2 ways that the city can participate in the CAMP program. You can participate either as a participant or as an investor. As an investor, your finance director is already authorized by your investment policy to participate in the CAMP pool or CAMP term. It is an authorized investment in our investment policy. And no approval from city council is needed. To participate as a participant, we need the council to approve a resolution, because if you're a participant, you have voting rights. You're actually a member of the JPA of CAMP, and you can vote for their board of trustees. You could choose to run somebody to be on the board of trustees for CAMP, and you can vote on their annual proxy and on their annual investment policy. So you in addition to getting to utilize the services of the pool and of the program, you get to participate in making decisions about it as well. So that's the recommendation tonight, is that the city council approves a resolution to join CAMP as a participant. And all of there's a bunch of materials added to the staff report with more information on the CAMP program, with the agreement, the declaration of trust for the CAMP pool for your consideration. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or carry on the conversation.
Thank you for your presentation. Do you have any questions?
I have comments, but I don't have any questions. Are
Are
you
there
ready
any
for comments?
Questions before we get going on comments?
Yes.
Oh, Councilwoman Namara?
You are probably already answered. So there's no fee then with CAMP?
There's a fee for sure, but you're not directly billed for it. It's taken out of the overall CAMP pool as an administrative fee. I don't know what the percent is off the top of my head. All the pools have a fee. You pay a fee to the county, you pay a full, a fee to Lave.
Okay.
Nothing's ever
recovery.
free anymore.
Councilman Holmes, did you have a question?
Yes, well, as I understand it, we can put money in and we can take it out at our discretion. Is that right?
Correct, unless you use camp term, in which case that money's locked up for a year.
Yeah. Now, what about Leif?
Leif is, there's no limits on putting money in or taking it out. Leif doesn't have the option of that fixed investment like camp does.
So we can't take money out of Leif?
You can take money out from Leif as needed.
Okay,
Mhm.
and same with the county.
Same with the county. With all three of them, you have, it's liquid. You have access to your money at any time. Usually within 24 hours, depending upon what time you call to make the transfer.
What time of day?
If you call at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you've missed the cutoff and the transaction won't happen till the next day.
Oh, okay. Well,
Could you just give a brief, I don't think I'm quite grasping the difference between Placer counties and Leif and this one, other than the term piece. Can you do pros and cons or what you see as
Sure,
an
well,
advantage really?
Sure. Well, they're really all the same because they're all governed by the same constraints on what types of investments can be purchased. They're all constrained by the government code and they're all pools. So there's somebody managing the Placer County investment pool. There's somebody managing Leif and then PFM manages camp. So their return just kind of depends upon the mix of investments that they choose to invest in within the pool.
Mhm. And do you think that they do a better job investing than the other two? or
Well,
is it-
according to their yield, they do.
Okay.
Yeah, they're consistently producing a greater yield than the county pool
Okay.
and than Leif is.
Okay.
Do they invest in a little more risky ventures? You know?
I couldn't say without looking at the mix of investments, but based upon their higher yield, I would assume so.
Yeah.
But again, I even hesitate to use the word risky because governments aren't allowed to invest in risky investments. They're just, you're constrained to very safe
Okay.
investments.
Thank you.
Mhm.
By joining as a participant, do we have any requirement of that we have to use it in any particular amount?
No.
Okay. So we can still use
Good
all
question.
three if we wanted to, or,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, then we'll go for comments. Councilman Dado Cabello.
Yes, thank you very much, Donna, for bringing this to us. Really do appreciate it. I know that I was interested, and I think my colleagues were as well, seeing if we could get our bigger bang for our investment buck. And so this is very prudent. I think that this is very safe, as you mentioned, that it has to be safe. There's built-in safety measures because it is government money. But it looks like really, I don't see any downside in participating in this, only an advantage, certainly an opportunity to gain a little bit more money. So thank you, to earn a little more money. That's what I want to say, to earn a little bit more money. So thank you so very much for bringing this to us. And I'm very supportive of this proposal. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Do you have any comments?
Thank you for looking into this and I support your analysis here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
To me, it's quite a difference.
Councilman Holmes, do you have anything?
Well, I was going to make a remark about with all the disturbances that are going on in college campuses about investments made by universities. But I won't ask the question about if there are any
It's not that kind of investment.
We don't know what the
It's not-
investment list is at this point, so we'll have to check that out when the time comes.
Right. I can tell you that investments in the investments made by these types of government pools are typically predominantly investments in treasuries. And that's usually the biggest sector. You are allowed within these pools to invest in corporate notes and corporate bonds. They have to be very highly rated, which doesn't get to your concern and your issue. Again, I don't have a list of which corporations are included in the pool.
Councilwoman Sarah Sammons?
However, if you I'm so sorry, but I wanted to address Councilman Holmes' comment. By joining as camp as a participant, you would have the ability and the responsibility to be reviewing their permitted investments, and you would have the ability to vote on them.
Councilman Sarah Simmons.
So just to expand on that, with the previous or current investments that we utilize, are we seen as participants as opposed to what's being presented tonight, that we have an option to be a participant and an option to actually vote and have a much clearer say?
Yeah, good question. No, so in the LAIF, you do not have the ability to opine or vote on their investment policy or their investment vehicles. You also do not have that authority with the county pool.
Right. Yeah. And I understand even if we, were to vote in a way that wasn't in the majority, at the very least, we have a say, and I appreciate that option for local government. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I will just add my appreciation to you for taking the time to look into this for us and to giving us these options. We really appreciate it. So thank you for all your.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for a motion.
Adopt a resolution. I move that we adopt a resolution authorizing the city of Auburn to join as a participant the California Asset Management Program CAMP, a joint powers authority, as a mechanism to increase the yield on the city's investment portfolio.
I'll second that.
Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Amara.
Yes.
Holmes.
Aye.
Sarah Sammons.
Aye.
Mayor Riddell Harris.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to our next item, which is the fiscal year 2024-25 budget development presentation for the general fund.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, Gretchen Johnson, your finance director. Tonight, I am going to be presenting an update and requesting feedback and direction related to the status of our fiscal year 24-25 budget development. By way of brief background, we periodically check in with your council during each budget year. You last received a presentation on March 11th, 2024 from the city's financial consultant of the fiscal year 23-24 mid-year financial update. The mid-year presentation had a projected deficit of 1.7 million. This is a deficit that began in fiscal year 22-23 and carried into fiscal year 23-24. This necessitated the planned use of reserves of 3.2 million, leaving approximately 5.4 million remaining in reserves as of June 30th, 2024. Unfortunately, this wasn't a one-time problem, as the projected multi-year deficit showed a structural problem up to $850,000 year over year. As your new finance director, I did not want to present the fiscal year 24-25 budget development update without trying to understand what happened. I've spent considerable time over the past 2 months researching budget and financial materials and speaking with city staff in order to make sense of the city's structural deficit. Unfortunately, as the stones were turned and new revenue projections and expense requests came in, the structural deficit became worse at about 1.3 million year over year versus the original 850,000 year over year. Additionally, the fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget as of a week ago, which we continue to refine, reflects a deficit of just below 2 million at 1.974 million. And with less than a few weeks to deliver the proposed budget to your council, this deficit will not resolve in such short order. Therefore, we are opposed to recommend further use of one-time reserves and a reallocation of one-time ARPA or your American Recovery Plan Act funds. But before we discuss our recommendations and request your council's direction, I'd like to go over the causes of why I believe we're in this situation. So how did we get here? First is a significant sales tax decline. In fiscal year 21-22, we experienced over a $2 million spike in sales tax revenue. And though it's easy to look back now and see it was clearly a spike, those in charge of city finances at the time used this spike as the new normal after COVID when formulating recommendations to your council about spending in future years. This assumption was greatly flawed and possibly reckless. These recommendations, as you'll see in the coming slides, mostly came in the form of additional staffing and negotiated labor contracts. Sales tax receipts are a major revenue source for the city and make up approximately 45% of our total revenues. Any fluctuations in sales tax revenue impacts our bottom line immediately. It's a volatile situation to be so reliant on sales tax given economic and consumer changes over time. Not to mention, we have only one major entity generating 40%, almost half of that 45% total in revenues. Not a coincidence then, does our look back at fiscal year 21-22 reflect a surplus of just over 2 million, the same amount of sales tax increase. Unfortunately, it appears our predecessors used the sales tax growth to project the future and grew the city too fast by recommending additional staff and contracts, implementing market steady wage adjustments, and by negotiating compensation packages for existing staff. Existing personnel costs for fiscal year 24-25 make up 61% of the city's general fund at 12.2 million, which includes the return of our unfunded CalPERS liability, now at 300,000. All other costs make up 39% or 7.8 million of the city's general fund. But it's important to note that up to 50% of those other costs are unavoidable expenses in the areas of CalPERS debt obligation, bond payments, insurances, utilities, attorney services, information technology, and also grants, which typically come with revenue offsets, and the cost of doing business for services and supplies, such as CPIs for contracts and inflation. The point is that there is very little remaining in discretionary costs that can be avoided. To further support my understanding of the beginning of our deficit in fiscal year 22-23, after the one-year spike in sales tax in fiscal year 21-22, I conducted an analysis of expenses by department and identified the major causes of the deficit. In summary, I was further convinced these additions and adjustments of staff and salaries and benefits and an increase in contracts in fiscal year 22-23 were and continue to be the main reasons our costs exceeded revenues that year by a whopping 3.6 million. That is the use of 100% of our $2 million surplus plus overspending by an additional 1.6 million. Furthering my pursuit for information, I did the same analysis to compare fiscal year 22-23 to fiscal year 23-24, when the deficit continued in the amount of 1.57 million. Along with continued declines in sales tax revenue, expenses continued to rise due to multiple changes in staff, negotiated labor and benefits agreements, and significant wage adjustments based on market conditions of surveyed larger cities. I do not want to say that those changes to staff and agreements were not necessary in order to attract candidates to our vacant positions or for our recruitments, further the city's ability to grow economically and improve services to our community. However, the changes took place too fast based on incorrect assumptions about our primary revenue sources. Lastly, for comparison, I prepared a year-over-year of the current fiscal year 23-24 projected costs compared to the fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget as it currently stands. With another year upon us of previously negotiated labor agreements that increased salaries effective July 1st, 2024, we continue to face insufficient revenues to cover our costs. To the credit of our department heads, most were able to submit proposed budgets with many reductions in discretionary costs. The net result is a preliminary proposed budget with a deficit of 1.97 million. There's more work to be done to reduce this deficit prior to returning to council in June with a proposed budget. Department heads have already submitted reductions over the past few days. Even so, the financial outlook is unnerving. Revenues are not projected to return to levels seen during the spike in fiscal year 21-22 until beyond our forecast model, even with including normal revenue increases. The expenses projected into the future are based on 93 existing funded positions at status quo costs as of July 1st, known other cost increases and modest costs for inflation. Absent change in continuing to use one-time solutions for ongoing expenses, our city's general fund reserves would be depleted by fiscal year 27-28 or 4 years. That said, we must correct our course. The deficit can only be controlled by a few long-term solutions. Adjusting employee costs and securing new forms of revenue are the main ones. As a step to curtail new employee costs, the city manager implemented a hiring freeze in April for vacant positions. The city has 4 vacant positions that are impacted by this freeze, but ongoing discussions about operations are fluid. But those positions are 1 finance technician, 1 police officer, 1 dispatcher, and 1 firefighter. New general fund revenues, though nominal, are coming to fruition in the form of fire and permit fees and new development. We are also discussing other revenue possibilities that will be harder to achieve, if achievable at all, over the long term. Most all require community engagement and support and have been previously discussed as options for the city. Though these revenue ideas are not new, revisiting them now is timely as we determine the future of our city. As stated earlier, the fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget is being prepared with a deficit of 1.9 million to be resolved before bringing a balanced budget to the council next month. We do intend to reduce the 1.9 million deficit before returning with the proposed budget, and department heads have already been finding ways to reduce their submitted budget requests by deferring costs that aren't critical to safety and core services. We are also evaluating our ability to maximize cost allocation of general fund costs being charged out to other non-general funds such as sewer, transit, and airport. We are also reviewing the newest frozen positions and may remove their budgeted costs entirely from the budget. That said, we do not anticipate reducing the deficit to 0 and therefore are poised to recommend the following one-time solutions. These amounts will change, but the recommended solutions are likely to remain the same. They include using additional general fund reserves of approximately 1 million. This reduces remaining reserves to 4.3 million, or about 21% of total expenditures, which is below the city's financial management policy of 30%. The use of reserves would come from economic uncertainties, employee unfunded liability, and the pension unfunded liability. In addition, we are recommending to reallocate $881,000 in previously designated one-time ARPA funds towards the budget deficit. Those reallocations would redirect $750,000 out of the original earmark of 1 million from our 2 business improvement districts in Old Town and Downtown, and the balance of $131,000 from the city's scanning of paper records. Moving forward after tonight, we will finish preparing the fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget and return June 10th with our final recommendations, and based on your feedback, return on June 24th for budget adoption. We have also invited our external auditors to present the final audit of fiscal year 22-23, which is just wrapping up, and that will further inform the city's financial position. We are taking seriously the expediency necessary to take action surrounding our structural deficit, and will return to your council as new information becomes available. However, this roadmap gives you an idea of what you can expect. We are planning an update of steps taken in August, and in September and October, we will provide a fiscal year 23-24 year-end update and begin a regular quarterly financial update beginning in October. And with that, I will turn it over to council for discussion and feedback.
Yeah, I just wanted to, since Gretchen's gone through the PowerPoint, I'd like to do some editorializing quickly. Can you go back to the big orange and blue slide, the 24-25 budget development update?
What page is that?
It's on page 3 of your packet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, one more.
One more?
2 more.
2 more?
Yeah. So if you look at this slide, this tells the picture of the reason why we're at where we are, right? So You look at 21, 22, we had a $2 million surplus, and then within 1 year, we added almost $3 million in costs. And those $3 million in costs come from a variety of different reasons. But council was provided erroneous information and frankly incompetency on a bunch of different issues related to personnel expenses. And so we are now here trying to resolve this issue. The other thing I wanted to point out is if we were on track with getting our audit done on time and you would have had the audit presented to you, you would have seen this deficit last year. But we haven't had that done yet. The audit's actually not done yet. And on top of that, it also hasn't actually been presented to council in the past, at least for the past 3 years. So that's all changing. We're going to present the auditor is going to come and do a presentation to you. I'll tell you, when I sat down with the auditor in November, I think it was, they said, do you have any serious concerns? I was like, yeah, I do. And I don't know exactly what the concern is because I don't have the information to say what it is. And so I'm relying on the auditor to give that to us. And they didn't have the ability to get the audit finished because we didn't have somebody here to who knew what they were doing to present that to us. So I think that the situation that we have is obviously dire. Staff is taking it very seriously. Department heads are taking it very seriously. And I just want to point out that $3 million increase basically in 2 years that got us to the situation we're in. That gray line is our reserves. And you can see it's just like a valley, right, to the floor. And that's the reason why we're proposing using these one-time funds, using our reserves and reallocating ARPA. The fact is that if we continue on this kind of the same path, the city will be out of money in 4 years. And we can't obviously have that. And so we're looking to fix this year's budget using those one-time reserves, but the structural deficit of 1.3 is going to remain. And we need to address that. It's going to be a painful process, I think. But we have to go through that process and make sure that we're able to basically recalibrate what the city is doing in figuring out the services that we could provide with the money that we have to provide them with. And it's not only cuts. We also need to look at the other revenue enhancement that we talked about, but it's a multi-pronged thing that we need to do. And we need to get it done quickly. Otherwise, we're going to be in the same situation next year. And frankly, if we are in that same situation next year, then we have not done our job to the residents of this community. So it's my editorialization.
Thank you for that presentation. I know all of us are very concerned and upset, and this came as a surprise to all of us. It's a little bit frustrating on the council side when we are giving incorrect information to make decisions based on, because we think that we're doing something that's in the best interest of the city, and we aren't going to be double checking financial numbers and things like that. We have to trust the subject matter expertise, and it's unfortunate that the city manager and the head of our financial department grossly overestimated taxes and underestimated costs and caused this. However, I will say is that both of those people are gone. We have very competent people in those positions right now that found the problem. And I have every confidence that we can, now that we have identified it, come up with a solution. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but I think that we're all in the same boat together, and we can work together to figure out a solution to the problem, so that way we can move forward and fix this for next year's budget. But it's one of those things that we have to deal with the problem that we have at hand. We have some suggestions for how we could possibly deal with that problem for right now they're not great solutions, but we don't have a lot of options given that the budget is coming next month and we have to make those solutions. Council, do you have any specific questions that you would like to ask right now? Go ahead, Councilman Amara.
Thank you. In your slide, you put the causes, and then in the staff report, they were a little bit different, or a little more detailed, I think. It says the primary causes in the staff report: the sales tax decline, previously negotiated labor costs, return to CalPERS unfunded liability, services and supplies adjustment to trending cost, public, So, okay, that's inflation basically. Public works and road overlay expense and fire equipment purchases one time. So my question, part of my questions involve, are these all spent then? So is the road overlay, that money is all spent?
Yes, yes, and that was part of the mid-year where this was first identified, is that there was an overspent of road overlay. And now we're not going to be including road overlay this in the new budget 24-25 because of that.
Okay. And then the fire equipment purchase, that was done, that was the fire truck? The
That is actually talking about the self-contained breathing apparatus. And that is supposed to occur at the very end of this current fiscal year, perhaps into the 24-25. Either way, it's going to be a one-time, and it was a planned use of general fund reserves for that.
Okay. And how much is that about approximately?
Around the 300,000 range.
And again, I don't really have any more questions. I can wait with discussion or,
Yeah, we'll start with questions.
okay.
Right. We'll do questions first and then we'll go into discussion just to make sure no one has any additional questions. Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo, do you have any questions?
You know, I appreciate the fact that I had an opportunity to sit down with Gretchen last week, and I asked a lot of questions then. I have lots and lots of comments, but I'll reserve those until after questions. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Holmes, do you have any questions? I know that we've all had this presentation given to us and time to answer questions.
Yeah, it's my understanding that there have been some grant applications for the police department and the fire department. And from FEMA, I guess. So where do we stand on those now?
I can speak to the grants that we currently have, like our police department has a few grants that we've been regularly applying for, or we're kind of mid a multi-year process. So in the police department, we have a POP officer grant, and that's running us about 396,000 for our portion of the match for those 4 officers. We have a grant that pays for a school resource officer that we apply for annually at about $100,000 each year. And then we have a tobacco grant as well that covers a portion of an officer, I believe. So in terms of a FEMA grant, that's not jumping off the top of my brain, is something I've seen come through. The fire department grants are typically for equipment or contracts and not for staff.
Okay.
Mr. City Manager, I know we were asking for appropriations from Congressman Kiley. Do we know when we'll find out about those?
We haven't heard yet. There was some correspondence that came through on the fire side. We asked for like 300-something thousand for the cost of the SCBA's. There was a little bit of correspondence that came back that said that if they do fund it, they wouldn't be able to, I think they said they wouldn't fund 100%. I haven't heard anything back on the police side yet.
Okay.
So there's 2 different grants. The police grant was for, or the police request was for radio equipment.
Okay, thank you. Is that all the questions you had? Councilman Holmes?
For the moment, yeah.
For the moment, yes. Councilwoman Sarah Sammons?
Well, I also sat with Gretchen last week, and I just, first of all, just want to thank you for doing the deep dive that you did. And, but no, any questions I had were asked and answered. And it's, really the questions are, how do we fix it? Not necessarily how we get here, and that requires us talking. So I have no questions, but I'm happy to move on to discussion.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I think we all thank you for, you came in here and just dug right into and helped us to all understand what was going on. We all really appreciate that. So
Thank
very
you.
much.
It was important to do so for the benefit of the city and everyone. So
Thank you so much. Council, do you think we should do public comment before we do our discussion so we can hear?
I wanted just to make a couple statements if I could,
Okay.
and then, this is going to be a lengthy item. We're going to have a lot of discussion back and forth between now and then, but
Yep.
I just need to say this for the purpose of the record, and I appreciate that our city managers indicated that, the city council acted on woefully inadequate data. And, but I also respect the fact that the buck stops with us.
Absolutely, yes.
And I take responsibility for making a decision to approve a budget and to approve expenses and to approve, you know, the accompanying documentation. And it just makes me sick as someone that works so hard to ensure, you know, that fiscal consistency and sustainability. And just, you know, talking when we went through labor negotiations and all these other growths and asking staff over and over again, do we have the funding ability, the sustainability? Is that here? Yes. Part of the problem, as our city manager indicated, is that audit didn't get done. And we asked over and over for that audit and it didn't get done. And we couldn't even see that information. But I still, again, I take responsibility. It's incredibly frustrating to see us where we are. We knew that we had this spike in sales tax because of COVID. We all knew that. We sat up here and we talked about that because the online tax, actually we received more in online sales tax because of the brick and mortar, the way the formula is, the brick and mortar companies, they were all closed. Disneyland was closed. Hotels were closed. They were not collecting sales tax. So their percentage of online sales tax decreased and ours increased. We talked about that. But again, over and over again, we were assured that there were the financial means by which to support the decisions that we made. And it's just incredibly infuriating to find ourselves in the situation now. So I just, for the purpose of the record, I do take responsibility for that. I don't want to, again, bad data, but at the end of the day, rest assured, the next time we have a request to grow something, I'm going to ask to show me the money, show me exactly where. And I do appreciate we've got great staff in place now. We have mechanisms in place. One thing we don't still have in place is that balance or that check and balance with the budget. We had the error with our paving dollars. And we don't even have any software in place that would have checked that. And there was somebody saying, oh, we've got extra money and we can do extra paving. And if we had had the software in place, we would have been able to see that, you know, and so that's just unfortunate. Again, I have complete faith in our staff now, but we're going to have to make some incredibly difficult decisions moving forward. And I hate that because I don't like being put in that position. We are here. We have to move forward. But it's, again, it's infuriating. And I know you all share that concern. Michelle, you weren't here, so you're off the hook. But I know you understand. You understand, and now you're here. And so now you have to deal with what we all have to deal with. But
I've been there.
you know, yes, you do. You hear, I know you. So you know, we've got to make some very, very difficult decisions. I appreciate the staff's recommendation to get us out for this year. The bigger discussions really are going to be, what are we going to do in the future? But I just, again, wanted to make sure it was clear. I own the decision that I made. I do agree there was some bad information. And it's just incredibly frustrating because, again, I remember sitting in, even in closed session asking, do we have the funds to sustain this? Yes, yes, yes. And that clearly wasn't the case. So we can, any other comments too, but I have other comments to make, but I just wanted to get that.
I also just real quick wanted to thank the staff for their transparency and bringing this in a public forum right away. That sometimes people try to figure stuff out while not bringing it up, and you've been transparent from the start and been bringing us in. And so we really appreciate that. And also that nobody has been talking about kicking the can down the road, that everyone knows that we need to come up with a plan quickly and that we don't want this to be an ongoing problem. And that's something that not every public agency does. And I think that the council is all committed to figuring something out so that way we don't taking the steps needed in order to not kick the can down the road and to solve the problem. So I appreciate that too. Councilwoman
Yes, thank you. And I ditto to Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo. But I also think that this is a good reminder that we have to diversify. We have been too reliant on sales tax, small businesses, Nella Oil. So we have to diversify. And I think some of the proposed suggestions are very important to take serious. We've been putting off and saying, talking about, you know, let's raise our TOT, let's put it out for ballot, but we can't wait anymore. We can't put off. We have to act. So now's the time to act, because we're going to be, and I hate to always do this analogy, Auburn Union went through the same situation, and part of it was they just cut. And in business, you have to grow, you have to look ahead. And I think that's what we need to do. We do need to diversify, and this is a very good reminder. And I think some of these suggestions we'll be talking about, but I'm very supportive of that. So.
Councilwoman Sarah Salmon.
Well, I certainly wasn't here during the time those decisions were made. But I do know firsthand what it's like to be given erroneous information and to have a business officer that gave us not only grossly erroneous information, but stuff that's been audited over and over again. And now, you know, it's no secret where Auburn Union is where they is now. And another reason why I feel it's important to bring that up is I bring that perspective of also being hopeful. And with the school district, you really only have one revenue. You can diversify, but your revenue is students, it's people. You don't get anything else. And at least for us, we have ways. We have ways to look at things differently, to see if we can diversify. We've already taken some great steps and really being proactive. Any decision we make from here on out, and I'm responsible now, just as much as y'all are. Any decision we make is going to be hard. It's going to be gut-wrenching. We're going to have long nights and long days. But, you know, I truly believe we're part of a team that's committed, all of us. So that's it. I just want to know that I do feel what you're feeling. I've been there, and I'm really sorry.
Councilman Holmes, did you want to say anything?
Not at this time. no.
Okay, thank you. Are we ready to move on to public comment? Yes. Okay, we're going to open this item for public comment. Come on down.
Mayor, council members, Connie Brocker. This is heavy. I just want to say that several years ago, I was handed something that was not my fault, but I had to deal with all of the fallout, and it was all financial. And I sold everything to deal with debt and to start over. And as I hear this, I am just so sick to my stomach, because it's remembering back to how heavy that was and how it impacted my life. And so I would just say that the best avenue that I perceive is, and I'm just going to say this, get on our knees and cry out to God and ask for his wisdom, because that's what I did. And he directed, he provided, when I was just in the throes of weeping in the middle of the night saying, God, I don't even know what to do, he had all the answers and he has carried me. So seeking God Almighty is a definite option. But second would be, I would recommend cutting what you can cut. And I know, Councilwoman Amara, you want to increase revenue, and you can do what you can do to diversify, but cutting can alleviate some of the pain. You know, if you have cancer, you can cut it out oftentimes and stop the flow. If you don't cut it out, it will continue to weigh heavy on everything in our community, you know? And I will be praying for you all with these decisions. And so that's my comment. I don't know where to go from there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Council, Mayor, yeah, this is the first I heard of this, a couple hours to the meeting and, you know, I'm up here, demanding our ARPA funds, but, I understand you guys, of the situation and, we were at 3 million for the ARPA funds. It was COVID relief money. We were at 1 million in Old Town. That got cut for, I'm not sure what circumstance. It was going to go to Wi-Fi or network, movement. And then that got dropped. And so the money got swallowed up again. So we ended up with $500,000 for our streetscape project. You know, going through the process, you know, and since COVID with our whole organization down in Old Town, it is gut wrenching. You know, when you say, hey, we have this, we're going to do this, and then we can't do that. You know, we're going to do a small park for 20,000 that we had some other grant money. And then that money was like, no, we can't. And then anyway, here we are. It's tough, as we all know. It just seems like a Band-Aid. You know, I really feel like you guys know it's a longer haul here that you guys you're battling, but to just take something that was already going to be something and just kind of throw it into this June or whatever you guys have your deadline by, that's kind of hard to swallow for Old Town and downtown. I mean, I wish I would have spent the money earlier and then we wouldn't be having this conversation. So, yeah. So.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment? Okay, seeing none, we're going to close public comment, bring it back to the council.
I guess,
Councilwoman Mara, or
I guess I,
you want to
wanna
go
go?
first or?
I was just gonna say,
Dr.
you know,
Santavia?
to the whole issue on ARPA, when the city manager mentioned to me about reallocating those ARPA dollars, my heart sank for Old Town and downtown because we've just worked so hard to make those areas better with the funding and the plans. And my heart just sank. And, you know, at this point, I'm just not sure how else we can achieve the savings we need in 45 days. That's the problem. I mean, even if we were to cut a staff person, I mean, it's just incredibly disappointing because we have that whole plan with the streetscapes for Old Town and downtown, and we were able to implement part of that streetscape with redevelopment dollars earlier on. But we've never been able to finish the rest of the plan because we never get money.
and I would agree, because what's going to happen is we'll have another plan that's going to sit on the shelf and get dusty and nothing will happen. And I share exactly what you're saying. I've asked almost everybody I can think of, is there any other money we can come up with to help us achieve what we want to achieve here? Because I'm not very supportive. I would not like to see the ARPA funds go away. And I think Brad's 100% correct. It's basically used money and now we're pulling it away.
The only problem is, and again, I hate to see that be pulled away, but I just don't see any other way except for reserves. And that's the concern, is that those reserves, we know we've got some incredibly difficult decisions for the next budget. We just have incredibly difficult decisions and we have got to preserve those reserves. And I just don't, it pains me, really. It pains me to have to use those money, but I just don't see, I mean, that's a, what is the amount again, Sean, the ARPA money?
$750,000.
$750,000. is, you know, the ARPA money was given to us by the federal government for the purposes of helping the city during COVID. That's what those monies were meant for. The monies were to assist the city. And we had $3.4 million, I think, or it was about that, 3.4 million, I think, ARPA,
Yeah.
somewhere around there. And we came up with a whole recipe of how we were going to spend that. And we talked about it, and we talked about allocating some for downtown and Old Town for the purposes of enhancement. And because at that time, again, our fiscal situation was different. And we thought that we could afford that. And it adds benefit, and it adds benefit to us. I get that because it's economic development, and there we have a return.
Yes.
There's a return. And so we drew that nexus and we made that decision. And now I just don't know how we get around that $750,000.
So is there any other one-time?
The only one-time money that we have is reserves. And if we continue to deplete reserves, then we are on this kind of spiral of potentially having, does it mean zero? You know what I mean? Like we just
No,
continue
I certainly understand that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the idea of not building something in Old Town that's going to have a place for people to come and hang out and do stuff, to me is, I certainly don't like that idea at all. Right. I mean, when I started here, I was told that we had a $450,000 surplus going into 24-25. And then each year after that was $750,000 in surplus. So how somebody could be $200 million off, it just like floors me. But the fact is that we're here now, and this is my problem to fix. It's not, and we could put, blame and all that stuff. It is what it is. But Gretchen and I are here in front of you trying to offer potential solutions, and none of them are good. Right. And so the idea of taking more reserve out to me is frankly a little bit frightening. And when I'm looking at a $1.3 million deficit, I'm looking at 13 people, 10 people, whatever that, or figuring out other cuts that we have to make. Right. But I'm to the point where I'm equating dollars to people at this point and figuring out how to recalibrate what we're doing, providing as much service as we can, but at the same time with the money that we have. And so, the idea of taking out of reserves, that's an option that council can follow. I would not recommend doing that. It kills me to know that we're not going to be able to do something in Old Town and downtown. We will end up getting all the plans finalized, and so we'll have a project that's shovel ready, and then down the road, if we're able to figure out our budget situation and we start figuring out things that we can do again. But we've also got a ton of deferred maintenance. We need fire trucks. We need all this stuff, and it's like my comment all the time is we have like infinite problems in finance solutions, and our finance solutions are shrinking rapidly at this point, and the infinite problems are growing even more infinite.
It's just such a grand number. I mean, that's $750,000. And I agree, Sean, the only other alternative is reserves. And that scares me. That scares me. And that's why I can support moving those monies. The ARPA, not the revenue,
Yeah, I mean, our reserves are there in times of an emergency. This is an unexpected emergency. I'm glad that the council has the forethought to have enough reserves that we have the ability to use some. The ARPA money was originally allocated to the city to help the city with their financial issues. We didn't understand that we had them because of what was going on at the time. But that's where that is. We have a history in the city of just saying we can't afford things and just kind of letting them go away. I'm wondering if we could view this as we're using this money, but we'd still like to do these projects, and we can maybe once our financial situation gets better.
100%.
if we could commit to allocating this money back to these projects at like a certain amount per year, we put in the savings account for Old Town and downtown projects or something like that until this money is repaid. So I don't know how we can exactly, but I'd rather view it as we're using this now, it's an emergency situation, and the ARPA money has to be used in a certain time frame, so that also works out. But doesn't mean that we can't allocate money from our general fund if we're doing better in the next year or two back to this purpose. It doesn't mean the project has to be entirely gone. It just means we can't afford it at this very moment.
And Madam Mayor, to that, I was just going to say that perhaps in our budget building exercise, there can just be a line item, maybe for OTBA. And I mean, it's going to be zero right now, but at least there's a line item in the budget to keep that.
We want to keep that promise.
Yes, to keep that memory, as a reminder, you know, that's there and that we made a commitment. But again, I just can't in good faith.
I don't think that right now is not the time, but I do think that there have been many years where we've had surpluses. And so I think this would be a good thing to commit to when we have that surplus again.
Is the project for Old Town, they still have 250,000 Old Town?
I don't remember the exact amount, but yeah,
380. And how much is the project to complete the project?
We don't have the engineering set done, so we don't have an estimate. Yeah, we don't have an actual estimate on what the cost would be. I've been looking at it. I think we could get a lot done there for the amount of money that we had, but without the engineers' estimates to go on, we don't know. And that was the commitment that we made to council. If you remember, we talked about this and it was, we'll get the engineering done, get basically an estimate, engineer's estimate, bring it back to council and have council say, yes, we want you to do this, or no, we want you to do something else. When we talked about the ARPA, the downtown or the Old Town project.
So, I mean, I'm just throwing this out. I mean, what if we split it, 350 from the reserves and let the two districts have 375.
Well, right now we're taking 300 from economic uncertainty, 500,000 from employee unfunded liability, and 250 from pension and funded liabilities. So the reserves are being depleted by, that's what, 750, 300 by over $1 million as it is.
And we still have how much in reserve then?
We have 5.4
next year too.
or something like that.
I have a hard time saying that we use any more money. I appreciate the hard work and the projects that they've been developed. Those are nice to haves. You don't spend extra money making your front yard look nice if you can't pay your mortgage. And we need to focus on what's important.
Yeah, the idea of having the project shovel ready is that, grants come up, federal earmarks.
Yeah, if it's shovel ready, then we can go for some grants.
Exactly. So we have the ability to do that. Right now, we don't, because we don't have the engineering done, but we're going to finish the engineering up. The other thing, and I hate to belabor the point about the reserves, but the idea that 2035, the sales tax agreement goes away, that's 40% of the 45% of our total amount of revenue. That's a scary thing if we're also going to be pulling more money out of reserves. And then we've got this fiscal thing also looming on top of all this other stuff. So that would be just my last comment on the reserve stuff.
Yeah, no, I think we all would love to find a way to save it. But I also think that there's been many, many years where we've not had these kinds of particular problems where we've been able to have that surplus.
By doing this, it doesn't alleviate the problem. We're still going to have to figure out a way.
This just gets us
sooner.
This just gets us through June, and then we're going to have to do some big problem solving for sure. I'd love to have a plan by end of summer on exactly how we're going to.
And I think we seriously right now, I mean, I think now is the time where we think about putting things on the ballot. You said your revenue opportunities. Well, we have to think about the TOT, Airbnb.
Yeah, so the deadline to put anything on the ballot is July 3rd, I believe. And so that we're asking council for direction to continue to, to look at this. We need to bring that back. I need to do the analysis. Gretchen is actually working with the sales tax consultant who also has a short-term rental arm, HDL, which is sales tax forecasting throughout the whole state. Their short-term rental arm has given us an estimate of what a TOT to increase from 8% to 10% would be. That's about 250,000-ish. And they're working on the Airbnb portion of that. Right now, we get nothing for Airbnbs. There's at least 60 of them within the city. If you look at just the Airbnb app, that's not even VRBO. And so not all of them are directly inside the city, but they're pretty close. And so that's a significant amount of, potentially double that, right? So we get up to 500,000 of new revenue. We won't see that overnight. There's a gap in reporting and doing all that, making sure people know. And we'll have to keep HDL on to do that for us because we don't have the staff capacity to do those audits, make sure that people are paying. So, but they get paid the same way that they get paid with the sales tax stuff, where they basically make it up on the stuff that they find and get it over to us. There's a little bit of a cost, but
Yeah.
it's important I think that, like when we're talking about taking money from Old Town and downtown and reallocating ARPA and doing all this stuff, I think it's important to look at revenue at the same time and not only look at cuts. I do also think, though, that we need to be realistic about if we're going to the electorate and asking for something, we need to show that we're making changes, right? Like we can't ask for something without saying, these are the actions that we've already taken and we still need your help.
Yep.
It's important to do
I
both.
agree 100% with that. And Sean, you and I have had this discussion over and over again. And I really, just going forward, we have got to do some serious deep dive work, some very difficult work and analysis before we can go to the electorate and ask for help, because we got ourselves in this mess. We got to get ourselves out. And I'm not saying we can't diversify our revenue. I've always thought about, the TOT, we should have passed it years ago and it failed when it went before the ballot. I wasn't on the council at that time, but the council put it forward and it failed.
And Airbnb.
And Airbnb, they never, because it's, and they were new, I guess, before. I don't know why they didn't get folded in, but I think that we've got some work to do before we can go to the
Well,
electorate.
yeah,
See,
and then sales tax, business gets hit again.
See, I
We
view,
take away the ARPA money, we take away the beautification, and we hit them with tax.
I view this as different because we're talking about TOT and Airbnb. Those are not a sales tax.
No, they're not.
We're not asking the community. We're asking the people who visit here to pay the same amount of
agree, but-
taxes
but
that
the
they pay in
problem-
other
They're
places.
asking
We're,
for sales tax.
no, I'm talking about these two.
Oh, yeah, those are.
Those two,
But I'm just saying that
I want to make sure those two get on the ballot first, because that's not asking our communities for us. That's asking us to have the same revenue source as every other city that we just haven't bothered to do. So that.
I
shouldn't be a
understand that. I totally understand that. And that is why someone like me, who is a fiscal conservative, has not been opposed to a TOT. It's just the timing of it.
Yeah.
For me, because, and the fact that the matter is, it's still going to the electorate, asking them to pass a tax. Even though it may not be them specifically paying, we are asking them to support a tax measure. And to me, before I'm ready to go to the electorate and ask that, we got to get our house in order. That's just my opinion. But, I think right now, today, what we need to do is we need to give direction on what we're in now, which is this budget. And so I'm prepared to take that action as to what we need to do for this year.
Okay.
And I know we're going to have closed session and we're going to have a lot of opportunity to kind of talk about what's going to happen going forward. Today is not the final say for that, but I do think we do need to give direction on what to do now for this fiscal year's disaster.
So the request from staff, feedback and direction is basically the second to the last slide, right? So it's use of general fund revenues, about $1 million worth, the reallocation of the ARPA money, and then that's basically it. That, because we're fleshing out the budget and we need to figure out how to plug this $1.9 million hole that adds up to 1.9 million. Gretchen said, and I know for sure that 1.9 is going to be coming down. I don't know exactly what it'll be, if it's 1.6, 1.5. I don't know what that is, but just in discussions with department heads, and figuring out what else we can cut out of each department budget, we'll be able to decrease that amount. But at this point, we need to know if you're okay with those shifting that general fund reserve and the ARPA stuff. And, it would also be good, frankly, if council, if you give us direction, if we end up at 1.5, 1.6, whatever that is, the delta from the 1.9 that you have now before you, where would you like that money to be restored back? right? Because right now we're proposing to make it up with the ARPA money and with the reserves. And it would be good for you to say, if it's 1 point, whatever it is, restore money to the reserves or restore money to ARPA. Where do you want the money to go back into?
So you're saying that if we make these cuts now and we find out in 15, 20, 30 days.
When we
that the-
present the next
damage
budget.
is not as bad.
Right.
Where we'd want to restore those funds.
Right. Because when we bring back the budget on June 10th, this 1.9 is going to be less. I don't know how much less, but it will be less. And so what I like to know is where do you want to put that money back into?
And throughout the year, even after we approve the budget, the dollar amount may go down because this is assuming that all of the staffing stays where it is. And we inherently just have people who leave their positions and have vacant positions for 6 months and things like that. So things change.
But that's for the next year. He's talking about if
now.
the deficit today, actually, we find out, let's just say in 30 days, that instead of being 1.9, we're at 1.5. But if we make the cuts today or whatever it
This
is.
is 24,
direction.
25.
No,
This
he's
is next
talking,
year.
he's talking, are you talking about next year or
Yeah,
this
we're
year?
talking about
Yeah, I'm
next year.
talking about 2045.
We're 24, we're talking about
24,
24, 25.
Okay, I thought you were talking about this year.
Right.
So that's the worst case scenario. It'll get better between now and June, and then it'll probably change over the course of the actual fiscal year. So we'll be doing what we can to decrease costs. Inherently, some positions stay vacant while you look to rehire them if we rehire those positions. And so things change over the course of the year. So in general, I mean, the hard thing.
I think our deadline, like our trigger points are going to be, if we are able to shave the 1.9 for fiscal year 24, 25 down to 1.5, there's a $400,000 difference between what we think it is now and what it ends up being, whatever that is. Do you want us to continue to take out the 1.9, so we've got a cushion, put back into reserves? Or do you want to put that cushion, that gap?
It's
back
still a
to ARPA?
deficit though. I mean,
is.
even if it's 1.9 and it's reduced down to 1.4, we still got to find, $1.4 million. So I'm not willing to fund anything back.
It would go into reserves.
Yeah, it would go
rather
back.
than-
That's the only thing
That's
I
what I'm
would,
asking.
yeah,
Okay.
reserves, absolutely.
And I think just for, ease of using the ARPA money, we need to get it spent so we can
Yeah,
say
right.
it's spent. So that needs to, I think, go over to the city. If we decide to give any money at a later date to Old Town and Downtown, it can just come from the general fund. I just don't want to worry about having this ARPA money sitting out there
Right.
and trying to figure out if we're going to use it or not, and then we end up losing it.
Right.
So I think it's appropriate for us to utilize the ARPA money and then knowing that we'd like to fund these projects when we're available to fund them. I think
Right.
that makes the most sense.
Right. And then the process of figuring out how to balance and remove the ongoing structural deficit future years, that takes place once we get this budget finished and done. Report back, there's, the last slide that Gretchen had is basically back in, we come back in August when the fiscal year is actually closed and we have preliminary numbers available. We do progress reports telling you where we're at. September, October, we do the same thing when the quarter ends. And then we're going to continue to come back to council at least once a quarter and give you an update on where we are and how things are looking. Right? We'll do
Because we get updates on where our taxes are, how our staffing numbers are looking, all of that. We'll
Exactly.
change it
Exactly.
as we go.
and then we'll do the normal mid-year budget update. And that needs to be, at least hopefully flat, depending on where things are at. But we'll do the mid-year budget update, see how things are going, and hopefully the deficit's not getting any bigger, right? Because we need to get things fixed, so.
Okay.
But we're intending to come back quarterly to council and give you updates.
And the audit's going to get done in a timely fashion for the 23,
Yes.
no more 2.5 years or whatever it
No.
was that.
So, okay, once we get, if we do have excess funds, it'll go back to reserves, but economic uncertainties or employee unfunded liability?
It'll go back into the economic uncertainty.
Okay.
That makes the most sense.
That's only.
So, I mean, with regards, so really, we just need to take, again, you need us to take action with regards to how to fill the deficit for this year.
Just directs,
So, which is, I would just make a motion that we adopt the recommendation of staff with regards to this year's deficit, which is the ARPA and the reserves
And that any amount that changes goes back into the economic uncertainty fund?
Yes. I mean, that's just for this year. I'm talking about this year's suggestions.
Yeah,
We're,
24-25 suggestion.
no,
No,
Yes.
just this year
20
right now.
this.
No, this is,
deficit.
we're all talking about 24-25.
Yes,
This
but
year is done. We're talking about 24-25
But he wants the suggestions for right now, right?
for 24-25.
Or for 24-25.
This whole conversation.
23-24.
sorry.
Yeah, it's all this upcoming year's
Yes,
budget.
okay, so because 23, 24, we've already,
We're done pretty much with that. It is what it is. So your
Okay.
motion is
I-
to,
yeah. Well, no, go ahead.
The motion is to use general fund reserves, 293,420 from economic uncertainties, 500,000 from employee unfunded
let's just
liability.
adopt the
Wait,
the
where,
suggestion.
what page is that on? So I
That's
can-
on
The
the
very
second
last,
page.
second last.
just-
250,000 from pension unfunded liability, 0 from the unassigned fund balance.
Yeah.
0 from prepaid insurance costs, and then 750 from Old Town and Downtown, and 131,000 from the city scanning.
And then any remaining funds when we come back from, when the budget returns would go,
It just
into that
decreases the
economic-
total deficit, but it shows up in the economic uncertainties.
yes.
Right.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Okay. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
So who made the motion?
Sandy.
Amara.
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Amara.
Yes.
Holmes.
Aye.
Sarah Sammons.
Aye.
Mayor Riddell Harris.
Aye. Okay,
I have a question.
okay.
Earlier this evening, we voted to join this camp
Oh, yeah, get
Yeah.
program,
2%.
which means investing money in that. Now, my question is, how much money do we have in LAIF? And
Gretchen's gonna answer your question.
Good evening. So we have in LAIF right now, as of April, we have about $13 million.
okay, is there some way we can use some of that money to,
That's all included in this
It's,
budget.
it's already all included in the citywide financial situation that we're in. So it's not different money. We have bank accounts and we have the county pool and we have LAIF.
Yeah.
And together that makes up approximately 18 million citywide. All of that has been earmarked, not earmarked, but it's part of our budget already. The general fund has 5-6 million of that. The sewer fund has 8 million or so of that. And it's all been restricted based on the type of fund that it's in. So it's not additional money, unfortunately. Now, the investment yield we get from it, sure, moving forward, if we make money, that'll definitely help our situation. But it's all been balanced in our budget already.
It's not just free cash laying around.
what's that?
It's not just free cash laying around. It's already been incorporated into the budget and into the reserves.
Or it's restricted funds that we can't access for these
Right.
purposes.
Right.
Well, I know if I have a personal finance problem, I go to my savings.
That's what we're doing. That's what the,
So using the
that's
reserves
what
is
the
doing.
reserves are. We have a savings account. We're opting to
Yeah.
put $1 million from our savings into paying for them.
Or I go out and get a loan. Or I sell something. No, I don't think we want to sell any buildings, but
Given our financial situation, I don't know if anyone will give us a loan right now. So, so we're gonna work on, we were good in the past. We put our savings in the bank account. Just like anyone who has an unexpected issue with their finances, we're using the savings account and then hopefully we'll balance our books and we won't have this issue moving forward. Any other comments? Okay. Then, city manager report?
Thank you. I'll try to get through this without having another coughing fit. Just quickly, because we got a bunch of other stuff to do and it's already been a long one. This past week, Michelle Reeves, she's a nationally known expert in downtown revitalization and placemaking. She started her multiple day work in Old Town and downtown. So she sat through into a couple, several small group meetings with business owners and property owners in both of the districts. I think there were 3 in each of the districts, 2 or 3, 4 people in each different small group. And the idea of that is basically to talk about what's working, what's not working, and gather more information on how things are going in each of the districts. She went on a walking tour in each of the districts as well. She's returning on May 29th to present those findings to anyone who wants to attend. It's a public meeting here in the council chamber from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. And I think I told council this before, but Michelle came to Loomis when I first started, like literally my first week there, and was really instrumental in kind of the changes that we made on Taylor Road and really kind of bringing vibrancy back to downtown Loomis. So the idea is that we'll be able to do the same thing here, following the same kind of discussions that she's had.
Can you make that available online? So if we're
It'll
not
be
able-
posted.
Uh,
Yeah, we'll post it.
You're gonna.
Oh,
have
the
Zoom.
meeting?
Can you make that so we can log in and watch it since it's gonna be in council
We
chambers?
should be able to do it on Zoom, I think.
That would be
I'll see
great.
if I can figure it out. And then lastly, we're finalizing a contract with an excavating company to address a couple different road issues that related to the sewer collection system that were caused by this past winter's rain events on Dairy Road and on Maple Street across from the courthouse. We're going to message that work prior to commencing on social media to make sure folks know what's going on ahead of time. But there's a couple different issues that popped up with all the rain and stuff that we need to fix in the collection system. Unfortunately, it results in, not full closures of streets, but partial closure. So we'll make sure that everybody knows about that. That's all that I got.
Great, thank you. As long as the council is okay with it, I think we'll pass on the council committee so we can move on to closed session. Is everyone okay with that? Okay. All right. With that, that is the end of our meeting. And so I'm going to say we're adjourning into closed session.
Well.